to me.
We are here. The risk takers, the doers, and the creators. Some of the world's most successful, courageous, and innovative leaders. To connect.
We need to have strategies in which everybody is involved.
To learn.
We said if we were going to target a millennial consumer, we needed to do it digitally.
To share.
Most companies make 90% of their profits from the same 2 or 3 products they've had forever.
To discuss the topics that affect all of us.
People start to complain about globalization. I think globalization, nobody can stop it.
The mobile disruption is very far along for consumers and people and not as far along for businesses.
It's always been about innovation. It's always been about first to market.
The innovation is going to have to come from the private side.
到那时，我国经济实力、科技实力将大幅跃升，跻身创新型国家前列。
China is a big player on the world stage, boasting an increasingly skilled, educated workforce and innovative industries.
We are here in Guangzhou, China's southern gateway to the world, on the global stage. At a crossroads of cultures and invention, to debate the matters that will shape the next 100 years and beyond.
Running the company in this time of disruption is challenging enough.
You are defined by your clients. You are not defined by your competition.
I've never met an employee that gets out of bed to make money for a shareholder.
人和机器的交互将会更加的简单、方便和人性化。
The digital transformation that's happening across our economy, all of the jobs are changing at a rapid rate, and we've got to keep up with that.
Welcome to the Fortune Global Forum.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Fortune and Chief Content Officer, Time Inc., Alan Murray.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you for joining us at the Fortune Global Forum. We're so excited to be here in Guangzhou and excited to have all of you here. You're a very impressive group. Representing about 400 companies from 30 different countries. You have combined revenues of $8.9 trillion, which is not bad. And altogether, you employ 23 million people. So pat yourselves on the back. It's quite a group of people that have assembled here, and we hope to make it worth your while. I just want to take a second to introduce you to the co-chairs for the Fortune Global Forum who have worked hard over the past year to help assemble this program for you. Adam Lashinsky, the executive editor of Fortune, you're going to hear from in just a minute. Nina Easton, where is Nina? Hi, Nina, chair of Most Powerful Women International. Clay Chandler, stand up, Clay. Clay is the executive editor international for Time Inc. Jimmy Flor-Cruz, Jimmy, where are you? China chairman for the conference. I also want to introduce you to the editor of Fortune, Cliff Leaf, who I suspect is here somewhere. Right there, there. They've worked really hard to put together this program, and I think you're going to find it really worthwhile. I also just want to take some time to thank our partners, because none of this would be possible without them. Obviously, Guangzhou is our host and has been incredibly helpful in putting all of this together, and we appreciate it. Also, our presenting partner, HSBC, and our other partners, China Southern Airlines, CEFC, the China Energy Company, Country Garden Holdings, Guangzhou Automobile Corporation, Guangzhou Pharmaceutical Corporation, GE, Huawei, Herman Miller. Those nice chairs you're sitting in are courtesy of Herman Miller, Insigniam, Midea, Shui Chin Fang, the official white spirit of the conference. Hope you get to drink some before we get to the end of this. USO Financial Holdings, Tencent and Atom Think Tank, and our very valuable knowledge partner, McKinsey & Company. I hope, and Midea also, and I hope I covered everyone. We couldn't do this without them. Let's please give them a round of applause. Just a few other things before we get started. There is an app for the Fortune Global Forum. You can get it in the App Store or in Google Play. We won't talk about Google anymore once Tim Cook comes out. You can also follow the program on Wechat in either English or Chinese. There are QR codes at the registration desk, and I think they're posted other places around the room, so you can find them. A reminder about our media policies. Everything that you hear from the stage over the next 3 days is completely on the record. But conversations you have over meals, in the hallway, on the side, should be treated as off the record unless everyone agrees otherwise. So you can certainly count on us to honor that. And then finally, just a warning that it is very difficult to get around if you don't have your credential on. So tie the credential to your neck and have it with you at all times, because you're going to need it to navigate the hotel over the next few days. And with that, let's get on with the program. Our next guest is the CEO of the most valuable company in the world, on its way to perhaps becoming the first $1 trillion value company. He is Apple CEO Tim Cook, and he's going to be interviewed by Fortune executive editor Adam Lashinsky. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so pleased personally that you're here helping us make history in Guangzhou. Alan, if we didn't mention any company that Apple has a competitive relationship with, we wouldn't have much to talk about. We couldn't mention any company during our chat. I know you've been here all week, so we have a lot of exciting things to talk about, but I wanted to start by looking back. Apple has a rich history with China, and you have a rich history with China because you've been traveling here a long time. Could you share a thought on that and also reflect on what has changed?
Yeah, I came to China for the first time in maybe a quarter century ago. So that's the reason my hair is gray by now. And it's just been a sea change. I mean, you think about it now, some of the most modern cities in the world are in China. In the mid-90s, you wouldn't find any modern cities of the world here. The infrastructure that is going on in China, whether you know it from the moment you land in the airport to the roads, it's just extraordinary. The most modern in the world, arguably. I think the other thing that you feel is that over that period of time, there's a lot more openness than there was in the mid-90s. Maybe not where we'd all like to be, but it's come an extraordinary distance. Also, China at that time was, at least from our point of view, was focused mainly in China. Now China plays a leadership position for the world in many different areas, and so it's like a different country. If you were to come in when I did and you went to sleep for the 25 years and you were parachuted back in, it would be unrecognizable.
As if you were a supply chain Rip Van Winkle.
That's right. That's right.
Well, let's plunge into talking about Apple's business in China, Tim. Perhaps give everybody a quick overview of the many things that Apple does here.
Yeah, it's China has extraordinary skills. And so what probably the part that is the most unknown is there's almost 2 million application developers in China that write apps for the iOS App Store. And these are some of the most innovative mobile apps in the world, and the entrepreneurs that run them are some of the most inspiring and entrepreneurial in the world. Those are sold not only here, but exported around the world. Also in the manufacturing space, China has moved into very advanced manufacturing, And so you find in China the sort of the intersection of craftsman kind of skill and sophisticated robotics and sort of the computer science world, that intersection, which is very, very rare to find anywhere, that kind of skill. Which is very important for our business because of the precision and quality level that we like. And then, of course, the thing that most people focus on when if they're a foreigner coming to China, is they focus on the market itself and the size market. And obviously, it's the biggest market in the world in so many different areas. But for us, the number one attraction is the quality of people. And so we've had an extraordinary relationship over 3 decades, really.
Let's come back to the manufacturing and how it's changed. I think most people think of China's importance to Apple, that Apple has been manufacturing, designing in California, manufacturing in China for many years. You were central to this strategy at Apple in your before you were CEO, and so the notion is Apple designed these things, they sent them over, China made them. It's an antiquated picture, isn't that right?
Yeah. It's not designed and then sent over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like there's not interaction. Mm-hmm. The truth is the process engineering and process development associated with our products require innovation in and of itself, not only the product but the way that it's made, because we want to make things in the scale of hundreds of millions, and we want the quality level of zero defect, right? That's always what we thrive for. And the way that you get there, particularly when you're pushing the envelope on the type of materials that you have and the precision that the precision of the specifications that you're forcing, requires a hand-in-glove kind of partnership. You don't do it by throwing it over the chasm. It would never work. I can't imagine how that would be. I don't want to imagine how it would be.
I know you visited a manufacturing partner this week. Could you tell everybody about it? And it's not, by the way, later in the afternoon I'm interviewing Terry Guo of Foxconn. Yeah. That's not who you visited this week, right?
No. I visited a couple of different partners. I visited ICT. And for those of you that haven't heard of ICT, they manufacture, among other things, the AirPods for us. And when you think about AirPods as a user, you might think, oh, this couldn't be that hard, it's really small. The AirPods have several hundred components in them. And the level of precision embedded to get the audio quality without getting into really nerdy engineering, it's really hard. And it requires a level of skill that is extremely high. And we met ACT, our ICT, back many years ago. They started making cables for us. Grace Wu, who owns the company, started her career working for Han Hai on the production line. And so this is an incredible. She was a factory worker.
Extraordinary.
This is an incredible example of the Chinese dream being realized. Now she owns a multi-billion-dollar company that does unbelievable quality work. And I'm not doing an advertisement for them.
You've just done a very good one.
But she's unbelievable, really. And so I toured that. And the thing that I love, obviously, the quality and the work that they do. But the other thing they do is she believes, she shares our view on how you treat people. And so if you were to go there and talk to a lot of the line workers, which we do often, you would find some of the happiest people in the world there because they're treated so well. And that's very important to us in how we present ourselves. And I have to compliment her on doing that. I also went to a company this morning that works on the front-facing camera for us.
Here in Guangzhou?
Here in Guangzhou. And again, highly technical, highly precise, advanced manufacturing. And the skill here is just incredible.
On that point, give us an update. I think it was about 2 years ago you said publicly, when you were asked, why do you do so much manufacturing in China? You said, we'd love to do it other places, i.e. the United States, but the sheer volume of engineers in China is greater than any other place we might discuss. Is that basically still the case?
Yeah, there's a confusion about China. And let me at least give you my opinion. The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor cost. I'm not sure what part of China they go to, but the truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. And that is not the reason to come to China from a supply point of view. The reason is because of the skill and the quantity of skill in one location and the type of skill it is. Like the products we do require really advanced tooling. And the precision that you have to have in tooling and working with the materials that we do are state of the art. And the tooling skill is very deep here. You know, in the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers and I'm not sure we could fill the room. In China, you could fill multiple football fields. It's that vocational expertise is very deep, very, very deep here. And I give the education system a lot of credit for continuing to push on that, even when others were de-emphasizing vocational. Now I think many countries in the world have woke up and said, you know, this is a key thing and we've got to correct that. But China called that right from the beginning.
Let's shift from the supply chain to your commercial business. This is a fiercely competitive market in every way. How is the iPhone doing against the competition, which is good, right?
The competition here is fierce. Of course, we've been battling competition for our lives. You know, we competed against a monopolist with Microsoft and still do. And so competing against strong competitors is not new for Apple. You know, we focus on innovation and believe that if we make the best products, then we can convince enough people to buy them that we can have an okay business. We've never had an objective to make the most. And very few times in the history of the world does the best and the most line up. Sometimes those two things intersect, but Apple is always focused on best. And if we happen to make most, then that's okay, but it's not the high order bit for us. It's not even on the list. And so if you look at how iPhone X is doing here, I could not be happier. We had a few quarters of negative growth on a year-over-year basis. We returned to double-digit growth last quarter, even before the iPhone X ship.
You're talking about Greater China now.
I'm talking about Greater China. Yep. But mainland China would look even better because in Greater China you have Hong Kong, and Hong Kong has been pressured for some period of time, and so it feels really great, and you know, we love being here.
As you know, Pony Ma, the CEO and co-founder of Tencent, is coming on after you. Several people have suggested that Wechat is so important for all smartphones in China that it's more important than the operating system, and therefore that presents a long-term challenge, or I don't know, a medium-term challenge to Apple.
I see Wechat or Tencent as a great partner.
Okay.
And so I probably have a different view than the popular view, and think very highly of Pony in particular. For us, think about it from our point of view, is We have, give or take, 15% share in the smartphone market in China. So that means there's 85% that somebody else is selling. The truth is, if it's easy to switch, who's going to benefit from that equation? And guess what? If you looked at switchers from the Android system to iOS in China, it's always a multiple of people doing the other way. And so I think, if anything, that 10 cents ubiquity in China plays to our advantage.
Because WeChat works just fine on the iPhone?
Because it works great on the iPhone, and because you can leave Android and go to the iOS ecosystem without losing all of the things that you built up in the Android ecosystem, right? And we think that if people try iPhone and begin to use it, the likelihood of people leaving is low. You know, who would want to have a worse experience? You know.
And so we're clear, your definition of a worse experience is some phone other than an iPhone, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that about Mac and Windows as well, just to be clear.
Very good. You've had a very busy week. You started your week here in China at the Internet conference in Wuzhen.
Yeah.
I want to quickly read a quote from the speech that you gave there. You said, "I believe in our capacity to make this world work for everyone, not because of technology itself, but because of the ways we choose to use it. We all have to work to infuse technology with humanity," you said. Yeah. What did you mean by that? What were you trying to get at with the word humanity?
Well, Apple has always stood at the intersection of technology and the liberal arts and the humanities. And so what does that mean, really? It means that we try to put the user the center of everything we do. And so we're trying to make the user experience great. That is our focus. And we think a lot about the consequences or what our products can be used for that are not good. And we try our best to come up with ways to diminish the things that aren't good and amplify the things that are. What's some examples of that? Take texting while driving. This is an awful thing. No one should do that. So what we did in the latest iOS 11 is your phone is going to shut down notifications and messages while you're driving. And you're going to have to, you can override it if you wish, but we're trying to give people a tool to do the right thing. Another example, for years, and we've been criticized for this quite a bit in some cases, for years since the beginning of the App Store, we've always curated what was in the store. Why we've done this is because we felt as a platform owner, we had a responsibility to make sure terrorist kind of content didn't get in the App Store, and hate speech didn't get there, and pornography, and all these things that you'd never want your kids looking at. And so we've had that review from the beginning. And so we really try to think about the consequences of the products we create, the downstream things. And I think that it is increasingly important in a world where technology can now do virtually anything, or is on a path to do anything.
And can be used for negative purposes.
It can be used for negative purposes, and it's important that the creators put humanity at the center of their creation.
And so it's the perfect segue to Apple's criticized for everything, by the way. At some point,
I get criticized for breathing.
That one I haven't heard. But
for the territory.
But in the West, there was criticism of your having shown up at Wuzhen at all, because some people feel that it was an endorsement of the government's internet policies, otherwise known as the censorship, etc. Your reaction to that criticism?
Well, I never base, I don't know how you guys do this, but I never base my actions on a poll of how people are going to feel about it and whether I'm going to take any criticism. If I did, I'd never do anything, honestly. I also, if you were to come to my office, in addition to a couple of photos or so of heroes, you would see this huge wooden plaque with the inscription in it of the "in the arena" quote from President Roosevelt. And I have always felt like this. The thing that's missing in our society is there's not enough people that want to listen and understand and participate. They have a litmus test of, do I agree with every single thing that person believes, and if not, I don't want to talk to them and they're a bad person. I've never seen the world that way. And so I know I'll get criticized for going to any meeting. I get criticized for going to meetings in the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't really care at the end of the day, because it is the right thing to do to participate and to find those areas that are common that you can work on together. China's done an unbelievable job of lifting people out of poverty. They've done an incredible job, I mean, far beyond what any country has done. We were talking about mid-90s to today. The biggest change is the number of people that have been pulled out of poverty, by far. And we should all applaud that. And we should all feel good about it. And so there are, in the environmental leadership today is very clear, and it aligns completely with Apple's values.
The Chinese environmental leadership, government.
Yes, I mean, they're very fixated on doing the right things to avert climate change, and this is something that means a lot to us as well. And so what we always try to do is find the areas where you can work together, find the areas of commonality, and then the things that you disagree with, take time to understand how somebody sees it. And if I'm going to get criticized for that, then so be it.
Well, and I think you have a room full of people who would agree with the philosophy of listen, understand, and participate. That's why everybody's here today.
Yeah.
There are specific policies that you have to navigate, though. So, for example, if something like, for example, Skype is pulled out of the App Store or VPN software, how do you approach that as CEO?
Well, when you go into a country and participate in the market, you are subject to the laws and regulations of that country. You don't bring the laws and regulations that you wish were there, that you want to be there. You have the laws and regulations of that country. And so from my American mindset, I believe strongly in freedoms. They're at the core of what an American is. And I have no confusion on that. And I think anybody that knows me knows how I view those things. But I also know that each country in the world decides their laws and their regulations. And so your choice is, do you participate? Or do you stand on the sideline and yell at how things should be? And my own view very strongly is you show up and you participate. You get in the arena, because nothing ever changes from the sideline. You know, nothing ever changes from there. And so my hope over time is that some of these things, the couple things that have been pulled, come back. I have great hope on that and great optimism on that.
Are you optimistic because of any conversations you've had this week?
Well, I don't want to reveal any kind of personal conversations, so confidential conversations. But I'm just saying that I look at things maybe a bit differently than most. I have this 25-year view of China.
Yeah.
So I've seen so much change in that quarter of a century. And to me, the arc of that is clear.
Yep.
Now, it doesn't mean that it's a straight line, but honestly speaking, in no country in the world is progress a straight line, right?
That would include the United States for sure. I would love to take your questions with the time we have left. Please raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you. There's one right here, and the mic is coming to you very quickly. Please identify yourself.
Sure. My name is Aaron Yu, Mr. Cook, and I'm representing Stora Enso, which is a Nordic company, and I'm heading their China operation here. In fact, we are playing a role in China in your global supply chain, and I'm delighted to be part of that.
Thank you.
You talk about a lot of your reflection over the past 3 decades regarding China development and the good things about China. However, talk about the supply chain definitely costs play a vital role, and that's what I'm dealing on a daily basis with your supply chain, folks. And I think a lot of people share the same concern that the cost is going up in China. Although, there's a good things about it. However, cost, again, going to be very important. So in your point of view, what does it take for China to continue evolve its advantage in the context of rising labor costs and continue sustain majority of your supply chain in China?
How can it maintain its supply chain?
The key for all developing countries is to continually advance. And so the key is advanced manufacturing and to build skills and craftsmen, the intersection of craftsmen and programming that can't be replicated or is difficult to replicate. It's bringing the total. Companies that only focus on low-cost labor, there are other countries, but that's not our focus. Our focus is quality, making the best, innovation. Those things are at the top of our list.
There's one right here. I don't see, someone's coming right behind you, sir. There you go. Right there, yep.
Based on what you said about...
I'm sorry, please identify yourself.
Oh, sorry, George Yip, Imperial College Business School. Based on what you said about innovation and processes in China, are you worried that this will overtake Apple's advantages in product innovation?
What I believe, I see it differently than you do. I think you see it as win-lose. What I see is that China is already incredibly innovative in so many areas. And there are apps and business models that could only have been created here. I went to a bike sharing company the last time I was in Beijing. That idea could be used in almost every country in the world, but arguably it could only have been created here. I went to a company a couple of days ago that has integrated everything from the review of a restaurant to the ordering to the paying. They've done an unbelievable job to the delivery. Everything in one company, I would give them an A+. I went to a company that is in the e-game space. In addition to publishing and creating games, they run arenas and they've created a sport. How many people do you know that's created a sport in their life? This is really cool. And they've done it. It could only have been created here. And so because a country does well, doesn't mean another one does badly. I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to mutual win-win. And so from an Apple point of view, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. We're going to keep innovating. And we know we've got to keep that up to stay at the top, and we're going to keep doing it.
I see one back there. It's going to have to be a quick question and a quick answer, please.
Keith Kroc, chairman of DocuSign. Tim, let me ask you this. In terms of what you see the Chinese government doing in terms of driving the digital transformation for their country, what would you say would be 3 things maybe that they're doing that would be good for the United States to do that we're not?
Thank you, Keith.
I think that both countries have a lot to do in this area, is the truth, is that China's very fixated right now, rightfully so, on reform in the state-owned entities. And this is a major task, and all of them could benefit greatly from a digital transformation. The U.S., from an e-government point of view, is way behind the Singaporean government, the UAE government, et cetera. And so there's great benchmarks out there. Both countries could learn from that. And so each country, I think, has a number of things that they can do in the digitization process, and probably, both have a long roadmap ahead there. A lot of improvement left.
Tim, it's been a privilege for me, and I know it's been a privilege for this entire room. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tim Cook, everybody. As I've already mentioned, our next guest is the founder and CEO of Tencent, China's largest internet portal and the company behind Wechat, a billion-user multi-purpose app which is like a mixture of WhatsApp, Google News, Uber, and Deliveroo. Posting $12.5 billion in profit last year. I'll just repeat that, $12.5 billion in profit last year. Tencent also has a stake in WeBank, China's first digital-only private bank, as well as international game developers. Its biggest game, Honor of Kings, has 70 million active users. And for the company's offsite retreat last year, our guest led his leadership committee on a 2-day, 52-kilometer hike through the Gobi Desert to represent the culture of the company. Please join me in welcoming Pony Ma. So Pony and I will each take a moment to put on our translation devices, as I think people in the audience will want to, and then hope that we have them on the right channel. All right, let's see what I hear when I speak in English. I don't hear anything, so I think I've got it on the right channel. Okay. Pony, welcome to Fortune Global Forum, and thank you very much for being here.
谢谢Adam.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. That was my indication to turn my volume up. All right. My goal for our conversation is to give this room an understanding of how innovation works at Tencent, because there perhaps has been no more innovative company in the last decade than Tencent. And I thought I would start by asking you to tell the story of how Wechat came to be, especially given that it has such a strong connection to Guangzhou.
Okay, it has to go back to the end of 2010. It was 6 or 7 years ago. At that time, the internet was transitioning from a PC to mobile. That was a very critical time period. So the PC internet era did see a lot of mature products from our company, but we felt that the mobile internet age could be a totally different ecosystem. The cell phone started to get more and more popular. The very instant message QQ on the PC end was facing such a challenge as well. And we've already seen the trend from the global perspective, because from the mobile internet perspective, there will be a new platform to be created. That's why we decided that we need to embrace such a change, even though there will be some challenge against our own QQ platform. And there were 3 teams simultaneously developing Wechat together. The name of the 3 teams are the same. One is done by PC, the other is by mobile QQ team, and another one, the third one is QQ mailbox team, which is located in Guangzhou. So the Guangzhou team won because they've been working really hard for 1 month, and they won it. The overall final product makes Wechat look like an email system. If you establish a group chat, it's similar to the section function of the email system. You can CC to a lot of people. It basically is an email system for Wechat, but it is so quickly that you thought it is a messaging system. So it was internal competition result, because when you're facing a huge challenge, you cannot, when you are don't know whether your team could finish this mission. At that time, you have to work really hard and challenge yourself, because when we were launching the product in the market, there were similar products in the market already. So QQ, as an older product of our company, we asked this QQ team to help the WeChat team. So we pushed all the users from QQ to WeChat. That was why it won the game.
Mark of a great company that is willing to not destroy the previous product, but to make a new product that will make things difficult for the old product, as you did with QQ. For example, Apple did this with the iPod when the iPhone came along. How do you articulate to the people on the QQ team, well, this new thing is coming along and it might be more important?
That is very important because the team of QQ knew it by themselves. They are destroying their own product, but it was not developed by them. It was developed by QQ Guangzhou team. But they knew that they are working for the same company. They got the same stock options, same stock shares. They're on the same boat. So they have to look at the future instead of looking at the interest of their own department. So it was easy for them to understand. We also give them a new mission to the QQ team, saying that you need to focus more on young people. The QQ team now are still developing the relations or developing the young students. For example, in the overseas market, there is a Snapchat. A lot of people are using that Snapchat. And there are different communities with different age groups. They have different demand, different requirements. For example, kids, they wouldn't like their parents to be in the same community with them, right? And they hope, they are in a peer, their peers are in the same community, but not their parents. So they are very active in QQ, but in the moments when they put some pictures, it's different style.
Reminds me, we heard just last night at Brainstorm Tech International that some parents feel anxiety about WeChat because they're getting so many messages from their teachers, from their children's teachers. And first of all, I wonder if this anxiety concerns you, but I also think it shows to illustrate how widespread WeChat is in Chinese society now.
Yes, it is widely used now, the WeChat. A lot of teachers and parents are communicating through WeChat group, and sometimes through QQ as well. But some information related to the kids, to the students, for example, major school events, all those will be recorded through the video or audio, video or picture form, and then they will be put on the WeChat so that students will their parents will understand what's going on. But there is some weakness as well. It drive people to use more frequently the cell phone. And I feel anxious because now I don't have my cell phone. I don't know what's going on now. And it's not good, actually. Too much attachment to the cell phone. You will feel anxious. Like if you don't bring your cell phone with you, you are not participating in some major event happening right now at this moment. And also another weakness is that you use too much of your eyes. So my eyes are getting even nearsighted. I was pretty stable in the past 20 years, but now my eyesight are getting worse. So that's something really bad. So I hope in the future, our next generation of communication platform could be better to the eyes. Shouldn't have such a. If there is a brainwave contacting my conscious, that would be the best.
Perhaps you're announcing in front of this audience where the next 10-cent innovation will be. You have some control over this subject, no?
No. I'm too modest to say that. We're only providing the software and service. Each time there is a major change in an era, the major challenge is the hardware terminal, including the chips and hardware facilities, as well as the energy and power technology, battery technology, as well as the wearable camera, or, for example, the lights could be directly put into or projected into your eyes. So AR, similar to that of AR, when you are looking at this world, you could understand a lot, you could collect a lot of information from the internet.
Will WeChat be the platform for all of these types of innovations, or should we expect to see something completely different and separate?
对。我们其实
In this WeChat platform, the function of it is exceeding the instant message concept. At the very early beginning, online and offline worlds should be connected by a very simple way. So back in 2012, we thought QR code, even though it's a very traditional thing, but that was a very important element connecting online, offline worlds. So when we design when we are adding each other friends on WeChat, you scan the QR code. We made that design because so we made people think, okay, we need to use WeChat to scan the QR code of the others in order to add friends. So there are a lot of QR codes occurring in the market, and by using WeChat, you can connect it to that official account of that person or that business. So that's a very good tapping point. WeChat is transitioning from connecting people to people to service. And based on that, we also add WeChat payment. The mobile payment of WeChat has been very popular right now, offline wisely. And furthermore, in the future, in the past few years, we developed some mini programs. And that's why on this Fortune forum, there is a mini program. If you scan it, it is not a standardized QR. It is a sunflower-shaped, round-shaped mini program code. If you scan it, then it's a mini app. And it is an app, but you don't have to install it. And I think that's the future. If the computer world does not have apps anymore, but only there are some constantly floating codes. Then if I see you, then there will be a program connected to you. So I just use this program, and then I forget. I don't have to install it, right? If I see a cup, I see a switch or a screen or whatever, I could also use these concepts. Even though we don't have such a hardware facility, but we think we should start from WeChat to establish such a new eco environment. That's why there are a lot of offline business and companies that start to embrace such a trend by using this mini program as well as their official account to develop the application of their industry.
With facial recognition right now, and what will the future look like?
I
think everyone is doing some facial recognition. I think we have really good advantage, or we have really big ability, and I think we can upload many pictures, especially a lot of Chinese faces. And I think we have a greater ability to let all Chinese to show their changes from their young faces to their older faces. And so you can predict what they will look, because they've been so we can help them to find those missing child. And after 10 years, after 5 years, if you miss a child, we can predict them what they would look like and help them to find the missing child.
Well, let me start over. Will there be cash in China in 5 years? And what about in the rest of the world?
I think in mobile pay, we are doing a lot, and we are competing with Alibaba, and we've been competing for about past 3 years, and it can pay very rapidly, or you can say that it's limiting cash in China. And I know that Alipay is a lot stronger online, but offline, Wechat is stronger. We began our red envelope in 2014. You may not know the envelope, the concept of lucky money, the red envelope. They did not understand red lucky money. I really don't know how to explain that, why it's developed in China. They think it's strange, but this is Chinese culture, especially in Canton. Every year during the Chinese Spring Festival, we gave people the lucky money. So for 9 years after the Spring Festival, the first thing we do is giving that lucky money. So we invented this electronic version of this, and you can open it, and you can and drop it in your group. And within this 3 years, it's over 800 million people are using this lucky money. And we opened this banking. And this is a big breakthrough. And so everywhere in China, you can see in parking lots or markets or temples or even beggar, they can use this. You can say, I don't have cash, but they can use this. They can just scan it. This is widespread. And we cannot say that cash will be eliminated. Cash is just digitized. You won't see fake currencies, and you don't see changes. Maybe maybe when you are small, like a street vendor, you don't have to find changes for that person, and then when you buy something at a little market, you can just scan, and then you can see how much they receive. You just need to a QR code and just scan it and just do it. That easy.
Tencent is a very big collector of data about all of its users. What is your vision for how that data will be used in the future?
I
think this big data will exist in many different industries. And after they embraced the internet, it's not only for us. I think we are using this big data in the communication area. We think security is important, and privacy is also very important. And I think in the cloud computing, we have to use AI to process this big data. But then we have to be very careful, because hackers or abuse can be beyond our imagination. This is our concern, and we have to invest in security so that we can protect the users' privacy and security.
Many executives in this room who come from traditional industries, non-digital first industries, describe to them, please, your ambition to help them connect to the digital world.
We talk about this a lot for the past year. We found out that the third industry, the service industry, they embrace the internet, they embrace the technology, no matter whether it's financial sector, they are using Wechat and then pay, and that's connected. And the insurance and stock market, they're all using all that. They are all using they're all growing rapidly. But you can see that there's P2P, and then we can see some problematic things in there that we have to manage. And there are other service industry, travel or transportation, especially in China. You see that share rides like Didi or Uber, or share bikes, and also 交通码. And then you see that in many public transportations, you can use a QR code, and you can see that in mobility industry, they are using that. And then there's a second industry, that's the manufacturing industry. You know that China is a big manufacturing country, so they realize that they need to use the internet to enhance or to enhance their money making. In the past, manufacturing industry, after they make that product, they need to go through many processes to go to the end user. But at the end, or in the future, they can connect this. They don't need to have this process or middleman. So that's a big change. And especially heavy industry. We have a Sanyi heavy industry. They have tractor, they have big machineries, and they try to work with us. They want to make their manufacturing industry become a service industry. They want to rent or they want to lease their equipments, and they can connect all these heavy equipments, and then once they create an account, and then you can borrow it, and you can make maintenance and everything, so that they become a service industry, and they can use this chain of service, and then it become a banking industry. So you can see that it was impossible in the beginning, but then by using the internet, they can become a connected industry. I think in the late future, we can see that agriculture industry is maybe they are leasing out their land. They can have somebody to manage your land. And this is not, right now, it's not realized, but I think in the future, you can use internet to realize that dream.
Come to the audience in a moment. I have to ask you, you mentioned Alibaba a moment ago. This morning, Jack Ma said that that you deserve his respect and his praise, and so I'll ask you in return your thoughts about Alibaba and Jack Ma, who, by the way, you are not related to.
No, we're not related. We're not related at all. I've known Jack Ma for many years, and when we were a very, very small company, there were 3 big companies in the past, but then we were very small companies in the past, and we were in separate fields, and we were competing, and then we obtained the market share. But some people say we are competing with each other. But I'm saying that, there are many people are competing with us too, and I think reasonable competition is promoting growth. So you see that. When you see number 1 and number 2 are competing, number 3 and number 4 are gone, because you can see that you get that fighting spirit. You will make your potential become a reality. And under competition, everybody would work together, and they become hard workers too. So I think this is very important. But there's a bad thing about it. There's so many competition. Or I think there's just too much, we have to compete in this. Oh, wow, that really makes me confused. So I think we want to be more open. And for the past 5-6 years, our policy is that we only do 1.5. We do communication, and then and the second one is digital content. And the half business is done. it means that it's not mature yet. That means we are not ready for this one yet. We're not ready for this one. The other half, we need our cooperation in this ecosystem, no matter whether it's fintech or transportation, mobility, or e-commerce, all that. We're not doing that. We let our ecosystem cooperating partners to do it. Because we are doing so much, and we want our team we tell them not to compete with them. We help them. We are supporting them. So we are. I think I think Jack Ma talked about supporting, but I think there's a difference between us and Jack Ma. I think at the end, when you support something, the supported one feel secure. If all my channels are in your hands, I think my destiny is in your hands, and your profit is in your hands. And in one word, I can take away your property, but we need to.
We need to decentralize the empowering, so we will make the empowered feel safe, even though we are empowering you. So we let you to, for example, build this building, and it will belong to you. Your fans, your customers are yours. You don't have to pay the monthly rental, and you don't have to worry about the monthly increase, annual increase. So I hope you understand what I said, what I'm saying. 我理解.
The room does too. We have time for one question, perhaps. Who would like to ask it? I'm looking for hands. Back there, please. Yes. Please identify yourself.
我叫王文祥。
My name is Wang Wenxiang. I'm from Taishu, Jiye. So I'd like to ask Pony, what is your value proposition personally? And so Tencent's business is based on your own value proposition? Thank you. Thank you, it is. So the several founders, including me, as well as those senior managers, as well as investors, we align our interests, our value propositions together. So integrity, you have to be honest, you have to be upright and person. So if you have this integrity issue, whoever you are, however capable you are, we will not use you. Secondly, we respect our investors. So when I get the first investment at the first day, I will promise that I will not let them down. We will do our best. So that's why you could see that most of our business put one place. We will not just spin off or doing the separation of different business, which will confuse the investors, where there will be might be some loophole. We don't do that. So when we're investing in other companies, we are so afraid that might be something hidden. We really would see that you can put everything together so that I can see it and I trust you. If you do have some other, leeways left or some hidden dark areas, maybe you're not doing something bad, but that will make you do something bad in the future. So investors understand and welcome such a value proposition, and also respect this spirit of contract. Whatever you say, so long as we just sign the contract, we need to implement this spirit. So that's the value proposition of ours.
Quick question. I'm looking. Okay. No, back there, please. Okay, please.
我是青藤大学的学员啊。
Qingteng University, so I also invested in Tencent. I also got the first championship award in a contest organized by Tencent. So, what do you think will be the next major industry or sector? Is it education or property? What is your strategy on AI? Because our work is AI plus education. That's why I would like to ask you these two questions. I believe for the next round of major market will be in the education sector, and the total size it might be 15 billion US dollars. But there's still a huge potential for the education market to develop because with people's salary going up, people will attach more and more importance to the kids' education. So I believe the market in the future could be several hundred billion or US dollars. And so is medical market. It could be even several hundred and 1,000 billion market. So that's why we're trying to bet different areas. We invested 7 to 8 internet medical related companies. We don't know which one will win, but we think that will be the future, especially those related to AI medical companies. That's our focus or interest. So in the chess, we have this fine art chess game, which verified that if you have some AI capability, and we are investing in the AI medical imaging industries, and also we're doing some R&D in that area. So we were doubting whether the AI could be beating the doctors reading this medical images, and now according to our research, we discovered that they could be even better, the AI machines. So in the future, the AI will do the CT or MTR or some other images, for example, auto-scanning the gastric images of yours. And there will be large volume of imaging to be done. But if you wholly depend on human being, it is not possible. So there will be huge demand in the market. And we're trying to work with the hospitals to successfully. Now we're trying to help the hospital to successfully find, by AI scanning, some cancer cases that the doctors might miss in the past. So we're still developing the other medical supporting or auxiliary diagnosis devices. So that medical area would be a very important area as well, and is related to everybody. So in the future, the content as well as gaming AI will do further research in those two areas.
Hey, thank you so much for sharing your vision with us. Congratulations on your success, and you are welcome back on a Fortune stage anytime you would like to come. Thank you.
好，谢谢。
谢谢。We're going to meet, whoops, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I'm very excited about that conversation. As a lifelong environmentalist, our next guest has championed his company's sustainability strategy and established the world's first automotive plant to use 25% post-consumer materials in all its plastic parts. He also has been instrumental in investing in wirelessly connected intelligent vehicles and projects that bridge the divide between the technological innovation and manufacturing. Please welcome Executive Chairman of the Ford Motor Company, Bill Ford, with Fortune and Time Inc.'s Alan Murray.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for being with us. You're here in China as part of a big tour, and you're making some news. Can you talk a little bit about what Ford's doing in China? Big commitment.
Well, we are doing a lot in China. We announced that we've got a joint venture on electric vehicles here, 50-50 JV. We've just announced we're doing 50 new vehicles in China for Ford and the Lincoln brand. We're electrifying our fleet here very quickly. And then by the end of 2019, all our vehicles will be connected vehicles in terms of modems in them. So,
and why the big push in China?
I mean, China's a great market for us, has been and will continue to be. Importantly, though, China's really taking the lead on electric vehicles. There's a real push to clean up the air, as you well know. And as part of that, there's been a big push towards electrification here. And there's great technical ability in terms of electrification.
So you have been pushing for electric vehicles for, 20 years? I mean, I remember hearing you and talking to you about this a long time ago, but it's been very, very slow in coming. Why has it taken so long to come?
Well, the answer is a little different all around the world, but in the U.S. In particular, it's been slow because the infrastructure build-out was slow. Batteries were expensive. Batteries took up a lot of space. And then individual customers worried about range. So you had range anxiety, you had cost issues, you had weight issues, all these different things. Of course, that's all changing now. Batteries are changing, the range issues are largely starting to disappear, the cost is coming down, but there's still going to be, I think, a big question mark as we push to electrify in terms of the retail customer actually accepting it in great numbers. And that's always a risk with new technology.
Do you think China is going to be the lead in adoption of electric vehicles?
I think China very well could be the lead, yeah. And I think that the partner that we're working with here on a new brand, basically, for electric vehicles, Zhantai, they've got really impressive technology at a very competitive cost basis. And that's really what you need. You need range, you need cost, so that the retail customer doesn't get choked out of the marketplace.
Do you also have government assistance on the infrastructure front, or?
Well, I think it's part of electrification. The one thing you don't worry about in China so much is once they decide to do something, it'll happen.
It happens.
Yes.
A little different in the U.S.?
It is different, although it's, that's happening too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's hard to think of any industry that has been buffeted by as much change as the auto industry right now. You're talking about electrification, but that's only one of sort of 4 concurrent revolutions that are going on. You have electrification, you have autonomous vehicles, you have ride sharing, you have the whole connected car phenomena, which will change the way people consume information. And
I would add to that 3D printing, artificial intelligence, deep learning. Yeah, you could go on and on and on.
Ford was a revolutionary company in mass producing cars for the middle class, but this feels as big or bigger than that, doesn't it?
I think it's awesome. It's really the most interesting time in my working career. I absolutely love it because if for the first time, we're going to have real winners and losers in our industry, and if those who get it right are going to end up less capital intensive, less cyclical, higher margin, much better relationship with customers, and really helping solve society's problems. Those who get it wrong will either not exist or will be low margin assemblers of other people's stuff. So
you talk about winners and losers. There's sort of a tendency on the West Coast in the U.S. to assume the winners will be the disruptors, the Teslas, the Ubers, the Googles. When I drive now, I use Wave as my navigation device. How do you take a legacy company and compete with those guys?
Well, it's interesting. I think if we were having this discussion 2 years ago, that would have been the prevailing thought. 2 things have happened since. One is a lot of those companies have found it's really hard to not only make a vehicle, but to actually integrate technology into a vehicle. And so the other is the intellectual property that we have is people are just starting to realize, wow, you guys haven't been asleep at the switch. You have been investing in these new solutions. And so, but your basic thesis, I think, is correct in that you're going to see lots of partnerships between big tech companies, startup companies, and OEMs, and also some of the traditional suppliers. It's going to be a very different world for us as we go forward than the past. Because you think of the past, we had a very prescribed supply chain that was kind of captive in some respects to the auto industry, and that whole model is being, to use your word, disrupted. But I look at us and I say, hey, look, we were the original disruptors in transportation. That's really part of our DNA. We should play that role again.
And what can you do to make sure that you don't that you do play that role? One thing you've done, by the way, is you've changed CEOs recently. Your CEOs don't seem to stay for too long.
Well, some of them do, and some of them don't. But I think that, in terms of Jim Hackett, I was looking for somebody who could do 2 very difficult things simultaneously. One is to run the day-to-day business, because even as we're imagining this fantastic future, you've got to make great cars and trucks today. And then somebody also who could be a thought partner for me on delivering the long term. And Jim is a big thinker. You know, he was a 20-year CEO at Steelcase and completely transformed that company during his time. And they had great runs of profitability, and his operating metrics were fantastic. But he also reimagined what the workspace might be, and in doing so, took Steelcase to #1 in his industry. And I'd known Jim a long time, and he was, in fact, was on our board. And I thought he would be a perfect partner to help do these two things at once, because each one is hard enough to do by itself. To try and do it at the same time, that requires special leadership.
So which of the 5, electric, autonomous, ride-sharing, connected, 3D printing and manufacturing, which of those 5 is the most difficult?
Probably autonomous vehicles, because there's so many elements to that. You not only have to have a smart vehicle, you have to have smart cities. You have to have, we have to have a discussion somewhere about ethics and trust, and all the things that have to happen on the soft side. I think that's one of the discussions when we talk about technology. It's very easy to get captivated and fall in love with the tech. But you have to take a step back and say to yourself, is this actually helping people, individual customers, and is it helping society? And in order to do that, you actually have to answer some of these softer questions perhaps first. So it's not only trust and ethics, which have to be discussed before you unveil these, but also things like job displacement. There's going to be enormous changes in the workforce as a lot of these forces come into place. And I think that they need to be discussed beforehand, because they're going to have profound implications for society, for the education system, and really for all of us. And I think that, so you ask which the toughest question. I think autonomous vehicles sort of in many ways encompasses all of those issues.
Because of the social implications.
The social implications, and also of the technology itself.
Yeah.
The ethics of the technology has to be sorted out before it's ready for prime time. All the other things we discussed are mostly delivering the technology in a way that the customer will find attractive.
Yeah.
And in the case of 3D printing, that's really much more about an internal process.
On the social implications of autonomous, what's the responsibility of a company like Ford? I mean, let's just take the most obvious example. If we put autonomous trucks on the road in the U.S., you're eliminating the #1 employer of men without college educations.
Right.
What's the responsibility of Ford in that?
Well, I think the responsibility for us is to start the dialogue. We can't solve all the problems ourselves, and I don't think anyone would expect us to. But what we can do is highlight it so that as a society we're starting to work on it. And I believe also, but it's not just the costs, there are great benefits too, by the way. So if you think of I gave a TED talk in 2011 talking about global gridlock and the fact that everybody was focusing on clean transportation, which I was too. But I said, look, even if we solve that problem, we're still going to have a clean traffic jam is still a traffic jam. So we have to solve 2 problems. One is we have to clean up the air. The other is we have to solve this enormous congestion issue, which I believe autonomous vehicles can help do. But it does require the vehicles and the cities to really act as one brain. And that's going to take some work.
I just want to point, I think maybe most people know this, but it really is true. You were way ahead of your time and of most people on these issues. I mean, you were talking about them 20 years ago. You were pushing electric vehicles, talking about the problems we were going to have in cities. It must have been a little frustrating for you to sort of see this coming, but have this giant legacy company and struggle to get it to move off the dime in the direction you thought things were going.
It really wasn't so much that. I think the technology wasn't mature enough to really deliver to customers and society the kind of things that we were talking about. So if you think back, electric vehicles at that time were pretty rough. They had, they were heavy, the batteries, they were lead acid batteries. I drove an electric Ranger pickup, and the entire pickup bed was filled with batteries. I mean, so that wasn't a terribly appealing thing to most people. Same thing with congestion issues. Yeah, I was highlighting the issues. We didn't have a lot of solutions back then. Now we do, and now we can really start to work on implementing. And I think it's really, it's terrific. It's incredibly exciting, but you know, technology will set us free if we do it thoughtfully. And that, to me, is the most important part, is we have to do it thoughtfully.
So in addition to Ford having been a pioneer of mass manufacturing of middle-class vehicles, you were also a pioneer post-World War II of globalized supply chains all over the world. And then last year, you got maybe one of the biggest hits when Donald Trump, running for president, attacked your company head-on for manufacturing cars in Mexico.
Yeah, I went to go see him on that.
So what did you say?
Well, I just said the facts weren't right, and we had a long talk, and actually a very good talk, about trade, about taxes, about employment. You know, look, we've been a global company for 114 years, and we've done business all around the world, and it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, it's, you know, Ford will invest in China, Ford will invest in the US, Ford will invest elsewhere in the world, and we can grow employment and grow opportunities, you know, multiple places. It's not and I think that was the biggest thing, it's not a zero-sum game.
Do you think you made any progress?
I hope so. I mean, you know, and I think that.
But he pulled out of NAFTA, which was critical to the way you were operating.
Well, I mean, a lot of businesses in the U.S. had built their modern business around the notion of NAFTA, and you know, it's not just it's Canada too. It's not just Mexico, and so. And we're still working with the administration on those kinds of issues, and we will. I mean, the nice thing is we have a voice, and we're going to continue to work on it.
Yeah, I want to open it up to questions in just a minute, but do you want to? It looks like we're getting close to passing a tax reform bill in the U.S. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm happy that the corporate rate's coming down, because I think that's important, and I feel that you know, the U.S. rate was kind of an outlier, and it really was kind of creating some abnormal behavior by some companies. So to the extent that that'll get corrected, I think that's good. The rest of the bill, yeah, I think it's on balance positive. Of course, they haven't had the caucus yet between the House and the Senate, so we don't really know what the final version is going to be. But on balance, yeah, I think it's good.
The Trump administration's argument is that rationalizing the corporate tax will lead companies like Ford to invest more in the U.S. Will it lead Ford to invest more in the U.S.?
Well, I don't think, you know, it's interesting. I don't, for us, we've not really been our business hasn't been driven by tax policy, so we've been investing all along anyway, and creating new jobs in the U.S. for, you know, ever since the Great Recession. We've actually been kind of a tear.
So you don't think it'll make a big difference?
I mean, it'll certainly help us, you know, retain our earnings and to reinvest. Yes, I do. But in some respects, we were kind of doing that anyway.
Yeah. Do we have anyone have questions? Yeah, question, Nathan, right up here in the front. It's coming. Introduce yourself, please.
Nathan Rosenberg from Insigniam. When you guys bought Range Rover and Volvo, and then that experiment didn't work, can you talk about what lessons were learned out of those acquisitions, and kind of why you think it didn't work? Because as one of your customers, I really appreciate that you taught them how to make cars.
Well, you know, it was sort of a, well, thank you. It was less of a function of it not working and more one of timing. You know, we got into a heck of a crunch during the, you know, 05, 06, 07, 08 time period. And, you know, thankfully we didn't go bankrupt, and we didn't take the bailout, and we did pay back all our debt. And I feel very proud of that. But unfortunately, some of the tough actions we had to take was we had to divest ourselves of Aston Martin, Land Rover, Jaguar, Volvo, as you point out. And those are all great brands. And you know, I'm happy to see that most of them are doing really well on, you know, under new ownership, because you know, part of those vehicles are ones that we developed that then hit the marketplace under new ownership. So I kind of feel a real kind of draw to them, because I know the people that work there, and I'm really happy they're doing well. And, you know, had we not gone through the downturn, would we have made a different set of decisions? Yes, probably.
Other questions? Back there in the back.
Thank you. James Sassoon of Jardine Matheson. Very, very interesting, Mr. Ford, thank you. One of the things you said was getting closer to the end customer, I think, and I just wondered what that means for the dealer model of selling your cars. Is it the death of the dealer? What's going to be the sales channel in the future?
Well, actually, it's interesting. You know, a lot of people think that the dealer model is an albatross. I actually think it's a great opportunity. We have touch points all around the globe. We also have service capability all around the globe. And if you think of, you know, a world of autonomous vehicles, those dealers that are in urban areas are going to have tremendous service opportunities around that. Will their sales mix change? Yeah, probably. But I think the business opportunities around all this will also benefit the dealers. You know, because servicing a vehicle and doing it well is something that's going to be needed regardless of what form of propulsion or what form, or whether we have a driver or not. You could make the case actually it's even more important without a driver. So will our dealer business models change? Yeah, probably. We're working very closely with them to make sure it works for them as well as works for us. But I actually think it's an advantage, as I said, not an albatross.
Other questions? Right here. Get the microphone, please. It's right behind you. Thanks.
Good afternoon. What do you think of the Chinese market now? Chinese market in new energy vehicles? Thank you.
Yes. So thank you for the question. So I think, you know, China has a big push behind the new energy vehicles, and I think it's a really good thing. And China absolutely can pull it off. One of the things I'm most encouraged by, though, is the cost position in a lot of these new energy vehicles, because, again, they have to be affordable to the customer. So I think we Ford have a big push on electrification in China. I think it'll be successful. I think China, you know, in typical China fashion, when they want something to happen, it will happen. And it's a very positive thing. So I'm very bullish on the outcome of electric vehicles in China.
What will the price point be on these?
Well, they'll be all over the place. And I think,
the lowest price point.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. So, you know, on some of our joint venture, they'll be certainly below what our current Ford and Lincoln prices are. But we're also electrifying the Ford and Lincoln brands, too. So we'll have an array of prices available to customers. And I think we need to make it really work.
Others? Yes, sir. Right here.
Hi, Andy Mock, CGTN. There's, of course, a lot of talk now about China's role in the Belt and Road Initiative and spurring investment and manufacturing along these particularly lesser developed countries. Do you see a role for companies like Ford in there?
I missed part of the question. Did you get the whole question?
No, the first part got
about China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh, Belt and Road.
Yeah. So there's encouragement of many companies to support the Belt and Road Initiative through investment, manufacturing. Do you see much of a role, or what role do you see for Ford?
Yeah, I mean, there might be, and I think, you know, clearly, you know, manufacturing is what we're good at. We've done it all around the world. We've done it with different partners, and we've done it in different economies, importantly. And so, yes, we can be very helpful. I don't know that exactly what role we will play, but if asked to play, yes, we can be very helpful.
One of the things that you've talked about for some time is the urbanization and the problems of urbanization, which is obviously going to be part of this rapid development process.
Well, yeah, and if you think about urbanization, you know, if we go really from 7 billion people in the world to 9.5 to 10 billion, and at the same time there's urbanization growth, all these gridlock issues just become worse. I mean, actually, there was a study done in China very recently on people trying to get to emergency health care. They can't get to the hospital. They're stuck in traffic. And so, one of the great things about when autonomy comes into play, it should do a lot of things. Number one, it should enable people to easily get to health care. Number two, there have been studies all around the globe that said part of the problem with poverty is people don't live where the jobs are, and they can't get to where the jobs are. But if we can provide low-cost solutions with dynamic shuttles and autonomous dynamic shuttles, things like that, that can actually go to where people live and get them to where the jobs are, that will be a really great thing. So there's, with autonomy, there are questions, but there are also enormous benefits.
There's a company here in Guangzhou called Yihang that's developing a manned drone. Do you think flying autonomous vehicles are part of the answer for cities?
They could be, but you think about congestion on the ground. I mean, we could easily have congestion in the air too, which is not something anybody wants. And the other thing is AVs have to prove themselves that they can go in 2 dimensions before they can go in 3. Certainly you have AV drones that can go up now, but they're not carrying people.
Yeah.
As soon as you start dealing with people's lives, it's a different equation, and you better have real certainty before you launch, whether it's a car AV or a drone AV that carries people. All these issues really have to be, you can't work them out on the fly, so to speak. You've got to really know what you're doing. So that's where, people kind of play fast and loose with the AV stuff. Oh, we're going to have AVs on the road by X, we're going to have AVs on the road by Y. I don't want to play that game, because it's much more important that we get it right.
Get it right.
Yes,
Yeah.
Because again, it all comes down to trust.
Yeah. Bill Ford, thank you very
Alan,
much. Fascinating conversation.
Good to see you.
Great to have
Thank
you here
you.
at the Fortune Global Forum.
Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, Terry Branstad has been a friend of President Xi Jinping back from the time when Xi Jinping visited Iowa and he was in his first term as governor. Last May, he became the ambassador to China and now oversees what is generally regarded as the most important bilateral relationship in the world. Please welcome Ambassador Terry Branstad, who's going to be interviewed by Time Group editor Nancy Gibbs.
We're down there?
Right here.
Oh, we're here.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Ambassador.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
You got a front row insight into the fascinating dynamic between the President of the United States, the President of China, because you were, apart from everything else, with them on their tour of the Forbidden City. So I'd love to start with your impressions of, and what you remember about what they talked about, and particularly what you think was communicated explicitly and implicitly during that time together.
Well, first of all, I'd say I think the chemistry between the two leaders, between President Xi and President Trump, is very good. And the Chinese did an outstanding job of really making the president feel very welcome. And they had some very frank discussions. Now, some of those, the night that they had dinner together in the Forbidden City, were kind of private, just between them and their spouses and interpreters. But then we spent a whole day in the Great Hall of the People, and there were some very frank and open discussions there. But I'm encouraged about the fact that their first meeting was in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, in April, and I think that went very well. They met again in Hamburg. Of course, they had the meeting last month in Beijing, but there's also been telephone calls, I think 10 of them. And that's an extraordinary number. And obviously, there's some really critical issues that we're facing. The biggest one is the threat from North Korea. I'm encouraged by the fact that China and the United States have really been leaders in passing 2 significant United Nations Security Council resolutions, placing sanctions, additional sanctions on North Korea. And I think China is working to enforce those sanctions. President Trump feels, and I feel, that we need to do even more. And we're continuing to have discussions with the Chinese and other countries throughout the world on what more can be done to convince North Korea that what they're doing is a suicide mission that makes no sense, that they need to, we have agreement that we want to see a denuclearized Korean peninsula, but we need to see North Korea discontinue the nuclear tests, and I was in Jilin province, which borders on North Korea, 3 days after they had the last nuclear test up there. They felt it because, it was like 6 point something on the Richter scale, and I know they're also working to implement the sanctions, but we need to look at additional things that can be done to try to convince North Korea they need to discontinue the missile launches and the nuclear tests.
Even after that latest test, Secretary Tillerson said that diplomatic options remain viable and open for now.
That's true.
What's the state of that diplomacy, and what do you see unfolding on what time frame?
Well, there's discussions going on between our two countries and also other countries. In fact, I met with Prime Minister Trudeau here. He's going to be meeting with Secretary Tillerson, I think, on the 19th of December. There's a possibility of Canada working with the United States and with other countries on looking what can be done. So we're all trying to look at what can be done to stop North Korea from this suicide mission they're on, and convince them that their security can be protected without nuclear weapons. And the real question
is that realistic, given how profound their commitment to developing those weapons over so many years has been?
Here's the thing. If they all of a sudden see they've basically alienated almost everybody in the world, including their longtime allies, and that things are getting worse for them, and there really isn't a future in the direction they're going, maybe then they will decide there might be a better a path. And certainly the present direction is one that's dangerous, and not only it's dangerous to everybody, but it's certainly dangerous to North Korea as the protagonist that's doing these illegal and dangerous nuclear tests and missile launches.
2 days ago, Senator Lindsey Graham suggested that U.S. dependents should be leaving South Korea and that it should be a posting for people with no dependents. Do you think it has reached that point?
Well, I don't know. I will say that it's a very difficult and dangerous situation for everybody in the region. I think we need to be concerned, and I know that all options are on the table, but we need to continue to explore diplomatic ways to try to prevent this situation from continuing to escalate.
Official U.S. policy is that our economic discussions with China are completely separate from our discussions around the North Korea threat, and yet those two seem to be continuously entangled, particularly in things that the president himself has tweeted and said in interviews. So which is it?
Well, we continue to work on the economic issues as well. As you know, when the president was here, our Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, had a big delegation of business people, and they signed business deals totaling over $250 billion. Also, the Chinese announced their intentions to further liberalize investment opportunities in the financial services and insurance area. So I'm hopeful we can continue to make progress there. There's still some basic areas of concern where there is not a level playing field. For instance, you can get Wechat in America, but you can't get Facebook here in China.
Do you see that changing anytime soon in the midst of this conversation about openness and?
We need to have fairness and reciprocity, and I know China is disappointed that they're not being looked at as a market economy, but the United States and Europe and many of the other trading partners in the world feel that they have not fulfilled the obligations to be a market economy under the WTO.
Your history as a long-serving governor was as a free trader.
Absolutely. I'm from an agricultural state, and we established a sister state with the Hebei province of China in 1983. I came here in '84 Xi Jinping's first trip to America was to Iowa in '85, and I'm proud to say we sold a lot of soybeans, a lot of pork. Now we're seeing the beef market reopen here. We're interested in seeing the levy on DDGs eliminated. We think that if you replaced MTBE with ethanol, you could also help address the pollution problems, both the air pollution and groundwater pollution. So, yeah, there's a lot that I think we can do, and I did as governor of an agricultural state.
What are the implications of a TPP or a CTPP without the U.S.?
Well, I think we need to continue to look at how we can eliminate barriers and encourage trade. America is one of the most open markets and has fewer barriers than most other countries. Unfortunately, in some sectors, there's great opportunities here in China. In some sectors, it's very closed. In the high-tech areas, in social media, in many of those areas, in pharmaceuticals and medical devices, there's a lot that could be done to improve the health of the Chinese people and reduce the trade deficit if we were able to have more reciprocity and level playing field.
Can you counter the narrative that we are at a moment where the United States is receding from its role as a world leader and champion of globalization, while other countries, particularly China, are filling that role? Can you bring any evidence to bear that
Well, the fact that the President of the United States just completed the most extensive trip to Asia of any American president in 25 years. As you know, he was in Japan, he was in South Korea, he was here in China, he was in, I think, 2 different locations in Vietnam, plus in Manila. I think that's an indication that the United States certainly recognizes this whole Indo-Pacific area is critically important. This is the area of great population and growth and economic opportunity, and we want to play an important role. We want to have fair and open access to this market and the other markets in this part of the world.
Do you feel in your extraordinary transition from your life as a retail politician, a very successful retail politician, to now being in one of the most important diplomatic postings in the world, there's been so much focus on the disruption of American diplomacy, what's happening at the State Department, the possible departure of Secretary Tillerson. Do you feel like you have the partners, the support on the other end of the phone that you need in order to get the job done here?
Yes, I feel I have the confidence of the President of the United States, and we have a great staff at the embassy and the consulates, and we're all working as a team, representing the United States of America here in China. And even though there's a lot of different departments and agencies, I'm the chief of the mission, and I'm very proud of the fact that everybody looks at themselves as part of the team and working together. We certainly saw that in preparation for the President's visit. It was a lot of hard work by a lot of people. I think it went off very well, and I'm very proud of our whole mission and the job they did. Our consulate here in Guangzhou also does great work. We have 5 consulates in addition to the embassy, and we're all part of the team, and we all work together. And my personal goal is to get to every province and assure the people not only working for the United States government, but the people of China, that we want to be their friends, and we want to discuss and hopefully overcome the differences and the barriers that we all face.
I want to give our guests a chance to ask a question or two in the time that we have left. Yes, sir.
Heinrich Weiss from Germany. Why don't President Trump visit North Korea like Nixon did in 1972 to China, opened up China by the visit to Mao Zedong?
I think the timing to visit North Korea is probably not right. I wouldn't rule out that could happen sometime in the future, but certainly not now.
Yes.
Harvey Soden, Senator for China and Globalization. You talked about trade, Ambassador. Why doesn't the Trump administration pick up the long-time negotiations of the Obama administration for the bilateral investment treaty? And if it were finally negotiated, could it get confirmed in the Senate? Thank you.
Well, the bilateral investment treaty, as a treaty, would need to get 2/3 vote in the United States Senate. You know what the makeup of the United States Senate is right now and how partisan and contentious it is. So getting a treaty like that approved, I think, would be very difficult. And if it were able to get all the support it needs in the United States Senate, I can't imagine it would be approved in China. So that's, I think, the difficulty. The administration has not made a decision on whether to go forward with that, but at this point in time, I think it would be a very difficult task, both to get an agreement with China, but to get an agreement that would be acceptable to get the bipartisan 2/3 majority for confirmation in the United States Senate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So I think it's pretty safe to say that there has never been a time in any of our lifetimes when business has faced the velocity of change that it faces right now. Part of that is technology, big data, the connectedness of everything, artificial intelligence, and the speed at which that's transforming pretty much every business in every industry. Part of it is the political trends, the backlash against globalization, which was the driving force for the global economy for the last 3/4 of a century. And part of it is the extraordinary rise of China and the role that it's playing in world affairs. So what we're going to do now is talk about all three of those trends with a very distinguished panelist of business people that I want to bring out now. First of all, the chairman and CEO of HSBC, Stuart Gulliver, and then the chairman and CEO of Lenovo, Yang Yongqing, and the founder and chairman and CEO of Hill House Capital, Zhang Lei. And I think we're going to have an interesting discussion. So gentlemen, please come out now and let's get going. And everyone have their suit up with their translation device.
Our competitors are still other banks. In retail, potentially our competitors are verticals represented by fintech companies and platforms. If you look at fintech companies, what they tend to do is come in and disintermediate a particular activity, be it mortgage lending, credit cards, payments, etc. And so it's in that area that banks face the Skype moment that long-distance phone calls did to the phone companies. In other words, phone companies used to make $32 billion a year from long-distance phone calls. Skype comes along, they make nothing, and Skype makes its money from advertising. So banks face that revenue hit in things like retail FX, payments, etc. So there's a revenue impact. What I don't think there is a situation where the banks will be replaced, because I think all of the bank CEOs are enthusiastic purchase of fintech capability, because the fintech industry almost represents a supermarket to purchase from. So, we have adopted facial recognition technology, vocal recognition technology, all of this kind of stuff, and machine learning and so on, we've purchased from outside. So opportunities there. But the big other threat is the cyber piece. So again, banks are more targeted by cyber criminals for the same reason they've always been targeted, because that's where the money is. So actually, clients expect to have total access and total security. That's quite hard to pull off.
But you have to, as you buy into this fintech technology, you have to be willing to dramatically disrupt yourself, to recognize that you may be able to do things at half the cost or a quarter of the cost that you used to do. So, are banks ready to do that?
I think banks have to do that to survive. We have to evolve at pace. I think there'll be less people working in the banking industry going forward. And I actually think in retail banking, and I'm being specific about retail as opposed to wholesale, the revenue pool will be smaller. So therefore, it's almost self-fulfilling that you have to adopt at pace this in order to get your cost base down.
I want to come back to the people problem and the jobs problem in a minute. But first, why you're in the technology business,
Yes.
but what do you see as the two biggest changes that technology is going to be bringing to you in the next 5 years?
Sorry, I need to switch to Chinese.
Please do. Feel free.
So, 没有什么
No other technologies could be exerting more impact over companies like AI or intelligence technology. AI is translated as artificial intelligence, but I would like to prefer call it augmented intelligence, because intelligence is to increase or augment people's intelligence. AI, that's the purpose of AI, not to replace. And with the internet getting more and more popular now, the computer, laptop, as well as cell phone, you can use them, access to the internet anytime, any place, anywhere. And more smart devices start to occur in the market as well. For example, the wearable devices could monitor your health, and smart speaker could be interactive, could have conversation with them. And more household appliances are getting smarter. Autonomous driving. Not only these, but also there will be more and more commercialized IoT, as well as smart devices will be developed, monitoring the road situation and transport situation and production line operation, as well as the safety of the society of each individual of us, and also sensing the temperature change, environmental change. So these IoT will be developing very quickly, and the data generated, therefore, will of large volume. So these data, together with the data generated by the ERP traditional system or education industry generated data, combined together is what we call the big data. And big data will become the sources of input for artificial intelligence or augmentation intelligence. And computing capability is getting powerful and powerful. Not only the speed of the computing could timely reflect each progress or process, or the each process development of the reality, but also the cloud computing could also facilitate that. So that's the drivers for the intelligence. With these two areas getting more and more mature, intelligence could be applied to different industries or sectors, not only smart home, smart office, but also it could be anywhere. Take Lenovo, for example, as a manufacturing company. In our industry, in each process, each step of process of our industry, you can see the intelligence from the development of products to supply to the market, to marketing, to manufacturing, to services. For example, in the past, when we develop a certain product, the engineer will make decisions in the lab. But now, we can collect the feedback of the customers of the products in the past through social media or through other approaches. We will decide what the next generation products will be redesigned. And the best example could be shown in the process of manufacturing. The most difficult thing is to do the prediction of sales. In the past, it was only out of nowhere. People just think a certain number. But now with the big data analysis, including our historical sales data, as well as today's feedback, social media feedback of each and every product of ours sold, as well as those data related to the selling in the supermarkets or other department stores, we could very accurately predict the future 1 month or 1 quarter demand of our products. So this helped us a lot to balance the supply and demand.
Very good for Lenovo, shouldn't it?
Definitely, definitely, definitely. So, 其实包括像我们的这个
Yes, including the service as well. In the past, if there is a problem with our product, then they will call us and we will manually handle that. But now 50% of the complaints or questions from the users are answered or handled by the machine because they're asking similar issues, repetitive issues or questions. So artificial intelligence or augmentation intelligence in the future not only will change Lenovo's business process in a very revolutionary way, but also it will become the overall strategy of Lenovo. We don't have other strategy. OE, AR. So our major business is now PC and smartphone. So in the future, we'll develop a more. That's the basis for us to develop more smart devices, including smart office, smart home, as well as commercialized IoT devices. In our data center business, it is basically a computing power a major part of the computer power. So not only the supercomputer, our supercomputer is leading the world. We are the one of we have 87 supercomputers among the top 500 supercomputers in the world. And also our storage devices, storage system are widely used in the cloud computing and internet companies' database center. So that's our strategy.
You're in a somewhat different position because you're an investor. You get to choose what industries you want to be in. So where do you see the opportunity to make big bets?
好，谢谢。
Thank you very much. I'll also touch upon the issue related to innovation. In the past decade, Hill House investment in China indeed invested a lot of innovation companies. So we call these companies companies of the scientific innovation 1.0 era. So it is basically business model innovation, be it Baidu connect human and information, Alibaba connect human and commodity, and Didi connect people and mobility, and Meituan people and service. At the end of the day, it is a marketplace. It is a marketplace connection, business model innovation. So maybe next time when the version 2.0 era comes, the innovation will be extended to even further areas, and innovation will help those traditional, lagged behind, and marginalized business or companies or people, so that they could catch up the train of innovation. So I'm really excited about this. How can we use the technology to empower the traditional company? That's what I'm interested in. The major investment recently is in a very traditional company. Baili is a women's shoe and sports shoe retailer. You know that retail industry has been totally beaten by the high-tech company. So according to the financial report, in the past 3 years, Baili's financial report have been declining consecutively 3 years. So we would like to use the technology to achieve a growth for them. How can we do that? First of all, technologies are well and better prepared. What does that mean? So let's take A refers to, we'll use ABC, A, artificial intelligence, B, big data, C, cloud. So we use ABC. Development has laid very solid foundations so that we could have the opportunity to make these traditional retail companies to shorten the distance between them and the tech company. So we believe Innovation 2.0 would be more inclusive and warm-hearted innovation. Not only it will encourage innovation, but also it will change the role of innovation from destructor into a equalizer so that everybody could develop in an equal way. So as a control holder, after investing in Baili, now there are 120,000 employees. Okay, the traditional approach is leverage plus cost-cutting and lay off the worker. That's not what we did. So after buying this, investing in this Baidu, we made this pie bigger and making these 120,000 employees more efficient. So we have 8,000 of 80,000 for retail stores. So these employees are the best UIs. How can we provide a better experience to the customer by connecting these UIs, by using technologies to empower them and to incentivize them? That's something I'm really interested. I'm really excited and passionately devoted myself into it.
It actually reminds me of our conversation with Jack Ma this morning. You're talking about a very optimistic, beneficent view of this technology future where the poor little corner shoe store is going to be empowered by the technology you provided to become more productive and more wealthy. But Stuart talked about fintech eliminating jobs in the banking industry. YY talked about artificial intelligence and smart factories that ultimately will lead to the elimination of jobs. Why should we think that technology isn't going to leave people out of jobs?
因为我觉得这个最后的科技实际上是它能够。
Because I feel that we have to answer this question. Do we want this technology, including augmented intelligence? Do you want the top 1% become Superman, or do you want help those 90% of the people to decrease to minimize the digital gap? And I think we need to do both. We want technology become more innovative, but we want the traditional be more innovative as well. So I think job is a fulfillment, is a person's fulfillment, and it's a dignity. And can we do that by using technology? And when we look at the store clerk at a shoe store, they can manage about 20 things or 200 things because they don't have to do it a lot of things manually because they're using technology, storage, and then they can put a lot of things on cloud and let him know that he can change it. He can help the consumers and what's best for us. And we have already experimented and some 3D scans. And we can scan the high heel, 3D scan the high heel. And can we help them to see that?
This notion that the next wave of technology is going to create more equality rather than widen the inequality gap. Are we on the verge of a great democratization of technology?
I think it depends on how it's applied. The reason that it shouldn't. So if you take sort of the banking industry, there's a lot of logical, repetitive tasks which are absolutely easy to basically replace with machine learning and replace with robotics. There's incumbent on us to X the general turnover a bank like ourselves has every year to retrain people and upskill people. but actually in most large companies, certainly in the banking industry, and it would be probably true of most companies in the room, you've probably got a 10% staff turnover every year anyway. So actually, if you look at it in those type of contexts, I don't think any of this results in dramatic headcount reductions as a binary act. It'll happen over time. Now, you could also argue that actually by reducing the sort of cost price of a lot of activities, you will actually have some kind of democratization benefit. So if I take just wealth management, in the banking industry, post the financial crisis, the sale of wealth products has been a highly risky task for a bank, because obviously, historically, you relied on individuals to give advice. If that advice turns out to be bad, and you can't prove that the person explained 12 years ago exactly what might happen, the bank is likely to be fined. It therefore prices the products to exclude practically most people other than the very, very high net worth. You take a client through an automated questionnaire online, and you test the same series of questions about what are your monthly outgoings, do you realize this thing could go down, what would happen if it did, how many dependents have you got, etc., etc. You are actually pointing out to them the risks. You are doing it at a very low cost price. You therefore are making, if you like, investments in places that have self-directed pensions, so the United States, Australia, places like that, where people save and invest for their own sort of future. You're actually, I wouldn't use the word democratizing, but you're actually opening up much better investment processes to them than you could do with very expensive individuals and with the risk of regulatory fines against it. So I wouldn't see it all as a dystopian kind of plus or minus black and white type of equation at all. It's much more complicated and nuanced than that.
And how you deploy the technology,
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
对这个，其实我还是非常。
I think we don't need to say that, or we need to worry about AI, that it's going to replace human labor. I think AI is created by human, so we already experienced that in the past, that many employees were in the production line. After the automation of production line, we went to the call centers, and when they use our products, they see some issues, and we need call centers to answer these questions. And now the call centers, half of the calls are answered by machines, and half of them, where did they go? They went to an IT department. So we are using IT to realize this whole process, to realize the automation of this process. So the computing algorithm, and I think that's the basic of, and the most important part of it. But it's not just from out of nowhere. But we need our own logic to realize this computing, or to this algorithm. So when we investigate algorithm, and when we do algorithm, we all need people. So I feel that I am very optimistic about this. I know many people and many manufacturers in the U.S., they come to U.S., but the unemployment in the U.S. already decreased. So it means what? It means the high-end industry is changing and it's moving. I want to add one point. I think Stuart and YY, they are very optimistic, and also agree with them. I want to add a couple points. Although ultimately we can solve this problem. We know that the technology revolution is at a very fast speed. It was not like historical revolution. It took years or decades to do the revolution. But then I feel that we need something more. We need some conscious capitalism. When you make investment as an entrepreneur, you need to encourage business models to spread technology, to become a creative disruptor and become an equalizer. And I think it requires conscious
technology in ways that empower people as opposed to in ways that displace people. Is that realistic?
我觉得就是当然是。
I feel that everyone wants KPI. I don't think it's contradictory, and I think it's giving all these entrepreneurs, we have a blue ocean. We have different place to go. We want to help these people from the bottom up.
For a minute about globalization. I mean, Stuart, you run a bank that operates, I don't know,
68 countries.
That's a lot. 68 different countries. And yet we are seeing this rising nationalism, particularly in the West, a backlash against globalization. Do you think it's over?
So I was reflecting with some colleagues earlier. So we've been doing globalization since 1865, and it waxes and wanes over that period, actually. You know, history would suggest that just before the First World War was a peak of globalization that tailed off for quite a long time. I actually think that, no, I think that actually some of the fractures that we've seen and some of the populist backlash to globalization, perhaps not well informed, perhaps seen as rival nations being able to gain benefits through trade agreements, etc., when in fact a lot of it's the automation we've just been talking about that's removed jobs, as opposed to anybody's free trade agreement, has created a tension that I don't think does go away that quickly. What we have done within HSBC, though, is trying to position our bank around what we see as actually a growth of regional trade areas. So we may be at a point where globalization is not necessarily going into retreat, but is at slack water for a while. Yeah, it's at slack water for a while. But we actually think regional grows, so inter and intra-regional grows dramatically. So things like in this part of the world, Belt and Road, RCEP, will actually drive inter and intra-regional trade between the countries in Asia-Pacific and China. ASEAN will continue to flourish. The GCC will continue to flourish. The EU, notwithstanding the fact that the UK is exiting, continues to flourish as an operating trade bloc for 600 million people. And others would have a better view on the future of NAFTA than myself, but there will be some form of regional trade agreement linking Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So I kind of see us organized around 5 big regional trading blocs, and I think those actually will increase their intensity and actually increase their logical fit together while we're in this period where, frankly, there's discomfort around some of the traditional, if you like, global trading blocks that have existed.
You obviously made a big bet on globalization when you are personally an example of globalization. You hop back and forth between the U.S. and China. But you're facing some real headwinds in the U.S. now, aren't you?
Yes.
Could be overcome. So actually, we operate in 160 countries.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
I feel that, Alan, your question, you asked the wrong person. You should ask the global CEO. You need to ask a global trend. When you add, you would only get one answer. We support globalization. We believe in globalization. Why? Because over half of our business are in other markets. For our Lenovo, our market is in over like 70 other places. So we cannot imagine without globalization. Our 70% of business is somewhere else besides China, and what are we going to do without it? So I believe globalization CEOs, they are all supporting globalization, and they are very confident about globalization. For Lenovo, I think we are a very good role model for globalization. And not only our 70% of business are in overseas, we also have a good policy. We have a global-local policy. That means that we want our overseas markets to be localized. So no matter where we are in the world, we try to, or we utilize the local resources, talents, because we believe the local talents, they understand their domestic markets and they understand the domestic culture. So, Ellen, you just mentioned that there is anti-globalization movement or the trend, also, especially after President Trump became the president of the United States. So I feel like that in U.S. or in Europe, we face some troubles or we face some issues, but there are a lot less severe than what we see in Latin America. For example, in Latin America, we have to pay heavy tax. When your company is globalized, you have to get used to that country's climate, and you have to have that ability to do so. So, in fact, I just mentioned that not only in the U.S. or in Japan, or in India, or in Brazil, in these countries, we feel that we already built our production base. And we not only have a production base, we have R&D base. So we can utilize the domestic resources and talents so that we can face these anti-global movement. So we are localizing in each market in each country. So I think we want them to think that we are a local company. So I think it doesn't matter whether it's globalization or anti-globalization. I think we can all can face the issue. This is our strategy.
Have a question for this panel? Let me turn then to the issue of China and China's growth. An extraordinary 2 decades, steady growth, fair amount of debt has built up at the same time. Can it continue, Zhang Lei? I mean, you're making your bets here. Do you expect uninterrupted growth for another decade? At some point, gravity takes hold, doesn't it?
我觉得中国
I think
China has a huge growth potential in the next step, so it has to be led by the entrepreneurship and innovation. So we can see it in each molecular of the air, in each cell of the blood of everyone. So what is the special feature of the innovation for China now? More than a decade years ago, when I was investing in China, the internet business model innovation, be it B2B, B2B, or B2C, it is C2C, copy to China. That's basically the model of innovation. But now China is transitioning from C2C to I2C, innovation to China. So a lot of innovations are coming from China to the world. Even sometimes the booking, online booking, ticket booking, or Meituan food booking, or online airline booking, etc. So if we can keep this innovative entrepreneurship so that everyone could fully use their potential, I believe in China, opportunities are only beginning.
Bets these days.
So we are very committed to. Been very committed to China. So on the innovation point, one of our IT innovation hubs is in Shenzhen, because actually we think the Chinese fintech is more advanced than the West. So actually we're going to pick up better ideas and greater innovation here in China than we will if we're on the west coast of the States as it stands at the moment. And if we look at where we're sitting now, we think the Pearl River Delta is a huge growth area. You're looking at a conurbation, Guangzhou, Foshan, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, of about 50 million people. So think Tokyo, Kawasaki, Yokohama, big conurbation. Per capita GDP is where Hong Kong was in about 1993. High-tech industry, and a very young demographic. So, no, we're very bullish. I mean, we just signed an MOU a moment ago to establish an HSBC university in Nanshan. And tomorrow we sign the opening of our securities JV, where we have 51% ownership of a national securities JV in Qinghai with the Qinghai Development Authority. We employ about 14,000 people here. That will continue to grow year after year. That's just in the Pearl River Delta, not in China overall. And I think we're at the base level.
Yeah.
So yes, percentage GDP growth will slow simply because the GDP number will get big, but that's just arithmetic. You know, the reason the US grows at 3%, we all think it's great, is because it's a multi-trillion-dollar economy. So yes, don't get confused by the optics of the arithmetic changing, but this still, I think, is one of the biggest investment opportunities for the next 20 years.
It's interesting you're saying the investment opportunity is not just China, but particularly in Guangdong and the Pearl River Delta.
Yeah, I think the Pearl River Delta within China, and the Beijing government, you know, announced this Greater Bay Area push, which looks for an integrated push for Hong Kong, Macau, Guangzhou, and that will be executed on. The other thing that we can all take absolute certainty in is China executes on its 5-year plans. And therefore, I think as a business environment, the opportunities are huge.
Yeah, where are you placing your bets? Which of those 160 countries?
No matter where it is, China will always be our home base. So we need to focus on the market and win the market, win this market. And China is different from past. We're not only the manufacturing center of the world, but also innovation, a part of the most important part of the innovation of the world as well. So in the past, a lot of technologies were imported from outside China. Even to today, semiconductor industries, for example, China UnionPay is going to import around 30 million value of semiconductors. So China is still part of the world's innovation. But meanwhile, the world should get used to the fact that there will be more and more innovations from China. So innovations will be from China to the world. And for example, recently we developed a AR headset. The first targeted market is U.S. market for that product. So our innovation results or achievements will be from China to the world. I also heard that Facebook launched some new features. Actually, those features have already been realized or launched by the Wechat. And also cell phone payment, mobile payment. In China, is already very popular and very advanced compared with the rest of the world. So I think the world should get used to the fact that China will become the part of the innovation of the world.
Yesterday, we at Fortune held our first ever Brainstorm Tech International across town at the Four Seasons Hotel. Zhang spoke there. A number of you attended. And one of the fascinating things about it, we pulled together 15 of the top entrepreneurs from across China and had them present to the group. It was very, very impressive. You'll all get to meet the 5 winners. They each won a Trump chief from Guangzhou Automobile, and they will be here either tomorrow or Friday, so you'll get to hear from them. But it's clear that there's some fascinating innovation and startup activity going on in China right now. Gentlemen, you've done an excellent job setting up the issues for this conference. Thank you for being part of it, and we'll dive deeper into each of those issues over the next 2 days.
谢谢。
Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. So we're next going to meet, stay in your chairs, because this is going to be good. We're going to meet the founder and CEO of a company that employs over 1.2 million people. He started the company in 1974 with $7,500 in his pocket and a belief that electronic products would be an integral part of everyday life, and here we are. He's now the largest electronics manufacturing services company in the world, China's largest exporter with clients such as Apple. Last year's acquisitions included Japanese electronics maker Sharp and Nokia's mobile phone brand. Please welcome founder and CEO of Foxconn, Terry Gu, who will be interviewed by Adam Lashinsky. Excited to come.
Thank you, Alan. Please,
Thank you,
Terry.
Welcome.
Well, we at Fortune pride ourselves on covering the biggest and most important companies in the world. So far today, we've given our audience Alibaba, Apple, Tencent, and now Foxconn, $140 billion last year. That's a big number.
Yeah, just, one of the
Terry, I'd like you to start, if you would, with just a few moments on the founding story of Foxconn. Alan mentioned you started it with very little money. Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, it's, let me speak, maybe Mandarin for. I was born in 1950. 我是1950年在。
I was born in 1950 in Taiwan. Back in Taiwan, we had to serve the army after graduation from university. So after 2 years, then you had to find a job. So at that time, the U.S. was trying to transfer its labor in business. At the very beginning, of course, you will lose money, as always. So I started to buy the shark loan. At that time, if it's check, if you cannot honor the check, then you will be sent to the prison and you will be sentenced. So the most of the chairmen of companies in Taiwan, basically, they're the wives of the major person, because if somebody is put into prison, then the wives could always rescue that person. But till now, it's been 43 years. Next year will be the 44th year of our company. So from the RSC, NOPS, Genesee, NOPS to Ontario Games, so that was the process of growth and colloquial games and all the electronic toys, Mattel games, to the later stage PC games. All those games or toys you played, be it Comcast or HP, Dell or IBM, to phone, Motorola, Nokia, and Apple, and Kindle even, 1, 2, 3, Alexa, Echo. You can always see the efforts of ours. So we been working with them since very beginning for the development. So my starting up business experience started from 1970 to today, 43 years already, and now we have around 1.3 million of employees working in different 12 countries, in plants in different 12 countries. So we just invested Wisconsin major plant, and also in Japan, we last year bought a project and achieved a break-even within 1 year. So that's a brief introduction of our founding.
Point out, we have a lot of ground to cover here. You've covered a lot of ground. It occurs to me, I asked Tim Cook earlier for his observations about how China had changed. You were born in Taiwan, and you came to do business in China far earlier than he did. What was that like? And talk about the changes you've seen.
I bring Tim Cook to China.
That's one of the changes.
Early stage, okay. Even Michael Dale, when he was 29 years old, I bring him to China, Shenzhen. I'll go back to, Yeah, 我是19
Back in 1988, when Jiang Jingguo opened the policy that Taiwan people could visit their relatives in mainland China. So I'm from Shanxi province. My mom is from Shandong, but grew up in Qingdao, and then moved to Taiwan. So in 1988, when the policy was open and there was a mutual visits between the relatives or people in between Taiwan and mainland China, so I came to China. So I had a plant in Taiwan. So I first of all arrived in Shenzhen. Oh, first of all, I took the boat from Hong Kong to Shekou, the first industry zone for the opening up of Shenzhen. I visited that city to find that there are a lot of working, very diligent workers, but there aren't too many works. There weren't too many works for them, so I decided to provide some jobs for them. For example, Tim Cook visited that a plant. One of the operators he was visiting, actually, it was our the head of the production line. His name is Wang Laichun. He worked for me many years ago. And at that time, we found a lot of operators from rural areas to work on our production line. So we trained them and then promoted them. At that time, from the rural areas to the Shenzhen, they couldn't even see any eggs. So I stayed in the United States for 11 years. And I believe young people, eating eggs would be good for their health. That was why we invest a lot to improve their nutrients by providing dinner or meals to them. Because most of the workers were from different areas, rural areas in Guangzhou, Shantou, and Fujian. So we signed a 3-year contract to them. And those poor people, poor workers, previously couldn't even have access to meat or egg, but now we provide very good meal. And then they had enough of eggs. So after 20 years, I brought all these employees back. I had a big gathering, and they also brought their kids. I found that their kids are really chubby. So, and I learned from the United States, if you eat every egg a day, that it's really good for your next generation.
So our employees believe that, and Tim could follow and visited one of our employees' factory, and so that you can see that we gave them opportunity. We treat them well. You saw YY. He was at a restaurant, and he was a very a person came to me and he said, "I'm very glad to see you because I don't know you, but you helped us, trained us, and then you also created many bosses, and we have over 1.2 million workers in China, and we have a lot of workers, and that means like we train a lot of people, and then we have that management system, and on that training system, they were able to learn from Foxconn, and we are, and I think we contributed to the whole process of the China.
Years, Foxconn has been the leading contract manufacturing company. Now you want to, you are moving on to something you call Industry 4.0 and intelligent manufacturing. Tell everybody what that means.
When Fortune invited me to be interviewed here, it was said that we are the biggest contractor manufacturer, and actually 20 years ago we already transformed from OEM, from JDEM to JDSM, Joint Design Manufacturing, JODM, ODM, and then to IDM, IIDM, Innovation, Integration, design and manufacturing. So,
我们就提供很多的。
to Amazon, we provide IDM. So we're not OMD anymore. It's not. We're just B2. We're not just a contractor. I want to talk about big data. I want to talk about artificial intelligence. We've been using AI for past 20 years. We have accumulated, just like Tim Cook said. I show him in China what's tooling in China. We develop over 1 million tooling, and many university graduates, they can make specs for tooling within a few diameters. They cannot indicate the tolerance. The tolerance is very important. When you open a bottle of water, it won't fall out. When you open this, you can see the water is leaking out. This is tolerance, and this is technology. So what I'm trying to say is that we used AI, many big data, machinery way back then. Our machine is telling us this tolerance is how much. And any university student, they talk about apps, or they can about subways. They can write software, or they can write apps. But then, even if you're a graduate of MIT or Caltech, or you have mechanical engineering master's or PhD, if you give him a file, and if you tell him to file to plus and minus 1 centimeter, it might take him 5 years. So our university student, we do a lot of very delicate projects, and we realize the theory and the reality, there's a big discrepancy. We know that the internet can do healthcare. We can do healthcare. We can do information technology, can do healthcare. But if you want to replace doctors, but it's something that can be replaced by AI. So we know that for healthcare, you need doctor support. And you asked me my experience in China, and for many past years, we have accumulated experience. We're not a traditional B2 industry. We can help our customers to customize. Sometimes we can help them change or choose, or recommend them. You can recommend them what kind of material they can use, and you can this material, they can come to me. I tell them what kind of material they can use and what's the spec that you should use, so the water will not pour out. So this is the stage we are in, and I know the 19th People's Congress, President Xi talked about the economy, and everybody is doing economy, and no matter what company you are, everybody is doing real economy, and everybody is affected by internet. But I think. Well, people talk about autonomous driving, but I think the real winner is still the automobile industry. We provide over 100 parts to Tesla. The first Tesla automobile was made in Taiwan. The California government gave him the incentive. That's why they moved to Fremont. But it's developing very fast. But I think the real winner in the automobile industry is the real car makers. So I think for us, the real economy, of course we're going to use internet, but we're not going to. I'm not going to call it internet. We're going to call it intranet. And China is changing. China is doing the Internet of Things. So I want to provide this technology from our company to small and medium-sized companies, no matter what they're doing. Let's say they do shoes, clothing. We want to provide them technology. Let me give you an example. In Wuzhen, they were talking about digital economy. There's a consumer digital economy, and there's also manufacturing economy. So the consumer digital demand is, there's a gray area. For manufacturing one, but you need a precise number. So we have to, we're going to give our know-how of our big data and give it to this small business.
Places, Japan, Wisconsin, and Guangzhou. I want to start with Japan. Why did you buy Sharp, and what has happened since you bought it?
Okay.
为什么 why Sharp? Because Sharp is it's a display technology. It's in the business of display technology. It was leading this industry. It's a Japanese company, and it doesn't matter what they did. They were Sony. There's Mitsubishi in Japan, and they are over 100 years old, and it's for third or fourth generation. And after over 100 years, some companies are doing this, but some European companies they're doing better, like Philips. They're doing a very good management. But for a Japanese company, this third or fourth generation, for them to improve their company, that's not the most important thing. What they want to do is to safely, securely hold on to their jobs. For example, they want to increase their job to 3%. If they increase to 5%, they will hide those 2%, and they say they will bring up that 2% for the next year. So their mindset is not just improving their company. Let's say those some good companies like Uniqlo and SoftBank. You have the first generation managing those companies. So they are their management system is different. And let's talk about Guangzhou. Guangzhou is, no matter whether the governor, he is a expert in aviation. And the secretary, Ren, he is very capable person. And when I build a factory in Guangzhou tonight, 9 or 10 o'clock, well, I'm going back to Shenzhen. So they say they want to know if I have anything to do here. So they're very proactive. And you see that they have a very strong government protecting this or supporting enterprises. And let's talk about Wang Yang. Wang Yang once mentioned, you see many foreigners coming to here. They all ask me, and they say, how is China's economy? But I want to know your economy, because I'm in the business of exporting. So they are exchanging ideas. So the foreigners want to know if China's economy is good. But if your economy is not good, how can my company do well? So we can see that Chinese government is supporting, and President Xi has a 30-year plan. And this is very different concept from the US or the Europe. When you have a 30-year plan, but then versus those 4-year term, you have a change in 4 years. You have to change or you have to learn in that 4 years. But then when you have 30-year plan, you have to go step by step. Okay, that's about Guangzhou. So let me talk about Wisconsin. In the U.S., President Trump, I think there will be some change. Over 10 governors are contacting me, and I go there and I made some investments. I built some high-end factories. I'm investing in 8K. 8K means it's a big data. The factory in Wisconsin is attracting American attention because they want to provide job opportunity in the Midwest. So Washington is very glad that I'm doing that. And Wisconsin, doesn't matter whether you're in Milwaukee or Madison, you can see they have everything that's something really good. For example, Harley-Davidson, it's in Milwaukee. It's been there for over 100 years. Or Johnson Control, ST Johnson, G House Care, all headquarters are there. And you see that there are a lot of technology in Midwest in the U.S. And you see some governor, and they all gave us good incentives. And these incentives is following the rules of the law of the U.S. And I want to add a point. When I started my business 43 years ago, the opportunity was given to me by the U.S. And now I have this opportunity I want to bring back to the U.S. And when I bought Sharp, and I only sent one person from Taiwan to Sharp because that's the way I want to do. And when I go to Wisconsin, we wanted to send only 10 people from Taiwan. And we want to bring some Americans to come to Guangzhou and to get training. And we also want to hire veterans. And I feel that veterans are very disciplined.
So we would like to send our people to be trained in in Japan. And in the future, we're going to use the high-tech AI, big data to manage these system. And then we will compare which side has the higher efficiency. So far, by comparison, we think these two areas are very promising. Guangzhou, as well. Guangzhou is catching up. Wisconsin has already woken up. So probably wait for 1 or 2 years, we could see the result.
One question, if I could see a hand up. And if there aren't, I will ask you that so I was thinking, Terry, while you were speaking, that you put the global in global forum with all of the places where you do business. You deal with business and government officials everywhere you go. The obvious question for you, you've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin and in the United States. What do you make of President Trump, who I know you've met with more than once?
Yes, this year 4 times.
And your opinion of what's your experience with him?
He's he's a very straight person, okay? He like you, he say he like you. He don't like you, he say he don't like you, okay? He very straightforward. This is number one. Sorry, 他很直的人。
Secondly, he's looking for jobs for people in the United States. Each time he said, "You should have more jobs to us, and the salary should be such." And thirdly, he is a businessman. he wouldn't talk something fancy, but he would use very direct, simple language. Me, myself, also is a business person being directed by policy.
Okay, I understand completely. Very last thing. We only have a short time, but I want to ask you about one other famous person who you've dealt with in your career, and that's Steve Jobs.
Yes. I really miss him very well. Okay, when we were working for, 我们当开始跟 Steve.
When we were working with Steve Jobs, he was a very great thinker, and he is looking for optimism. Looking for being perfect. So he was very stringent, and that is why we are also looking for the same perfection. I was very lucky. That was one of those few Chinese people that was invited to attend his funeral. After attending his funeral, I realized he was believing in Tantra. Tantranism in Tibetan. So he had two ceremonies. One is held in the Western way. So there is a yellow yellowism and blackism in the Tantraism in Tibetan. He believes in the yellowism in Tantraism, similar to that of blackism. So he is very demanding. He's very stringent. He was. But whenever you have difficulties, for example, he will help you. For example, in our company, there was a suicide accident happened in our company. And at that time, Jimmy Carter, was, the former president of Apple, was of the United States, was a director of Apple. And then he asked him, who is the best doctor in the United States that has the most authority to deal with the suicide? And he brought this person to China. And he also brought Air Force expert as well as Cornell University expert come to stay here for 2 days to address the psychological issues as well as suicidal issues in our company. And Jimmy Carter was here even by himself. So I think different people have different perspectives. He has innovation, creativity, and his vision. The reason, I sometimes could see the shortcomings and made decisions, for example, killed our cooperation with Motorola and another company, but he could see the future. So that's why I miss him so much, working with him. Even though he was very stringent, but when you needed him, he would help you from the bottom of his heart. He's a great man.
Appreciate so much about you being here with us today is that we have in you the so much history of global business and also in your company the future. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Careful, careful. According to a McKinsey Global Institute report earlier this year, globalization has been a powerful force for economic growth. Goods, services, finance, data, and people moving across borders adds to GDP and fuels productivity growth. And China has been one of the world's major beneficiaries. And as exports surged from just $257 billion in 2000 to $2.4 trillion in 2016, China has become the world's top exporter. Here to discuss the impacts of this new era of globalization, please welcome Victor Fung, Hank Paulson, and Franz van Houten with Fortune's Nina Easton. And first, we'll hear a special message from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Greetings to the Fortune Global Forum. Thank you for your focus on openness and innovation. Science and technology are transforming our world, and they have brought much good. A growing global middle class, fewer people in extreme poverty, access to better health care and education, but there has been unintended damage. And I would highlight two: climate change and growing inequality. The good news is that science is on our side. Innovation and technology are delivering new ways to fight poverty, expand education, and green our planet. The United Nations is committed to building a world of sustainability, prosperity, and peace. Let us ensure that the fourth industrial revolution is a force for good, for the benefit of all. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Welcome to our last panel of the day. And boy, it's truly an esteemed panel. We have seen so much dramatic change in globalization, really even in just the past year, the political dynamics of it as well as the economic dynamics. So our panel is going to drill down on that and also provide some good advice to global leaders, global business leaders on operating in this new environment. Hank, I wanted to start with you as somebody who is obviously somebody who has deep, deep China experience and a former cabinet secretary, but you also wrote a book on how to deal with China. With China professing to be the driver of globalization now, is that something that you would approach differently?
Well, obviously, there are certain things that stay the same and certain things that are different. And obviously, this is a different China that global companies are operating in, multinational companies are, than they were 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. But certain things are still the same. And one of them is, I get asked all the time by global companies, how do we get a good management team? How do we do this or that? And what I say to them is you have to begin by putting your very best people here. And that was the same as it was years ago. Not put someone who you think you can spare, but you have to put someone here to figure it out and work it out on the ground. And there are huge opportunities, but there are huge challenges. And it's becoming more complicated and difficult all the time. If you're a global company, there's a whole new set of regulations that you need to figure out. There's still not a level playing field, but there's big opportunity.
And broadly speaking, previously the U.S. was seen as the driver of globalization. What do you think about U.S.-China relations today?
Wow, okay. Well, I would say, Nina, frankly, I'm a bit concerned when I look at U.S.-China relations. Start with the positive. At the top, the two heads of state, two presidents, have a good relationship and a good rapport. And what does that mean? That means if they're really difficult, complicated issues like North Korea, there's a greater possibility of making progress on those. But then there are many other significant issues that need to be dealt with, and that takes good people on each team, to work together. So as I look at it today, one of the things that disturbs me or concerns me is I see, other than North Korea, I don't see what the issues are, even though we have many issues where there are shared interests, where you see the two sides working together collaboratively toward a common goal. And so we have a situation where President Trump campaigned on, rebalancing trade and the economic relations, and I'm all for that. And so it shouldn't be any surprise that you get the answer you get on market economy status, or the aluminum trade case, or the 301 investigation, or the national security legislation making its way through Congress that is more or less targeted toward China. But the thing that is missing is, where are the areas that we're working together, okay? And why aren't we working on bilateral investment that's going to create jobs? What about working together to solve environmental problems and helping the U.S. Export more environmental goods and services to China, or working on export capacity, or opening up key markets? So again, as I look at it, President Trump is just about to have his first and really only major domestic legislative achievement, which is tax reform. And when that is behind him, and that's done, I think he's naturally going to turn to his domestic constituents, and he's going to focus on foreign policy and trade areas where he can do things unilaterally. That's going to bring trade tension. And what you'd like to have is then some, I liked the comprehensive economic dialogue. That has stalled, right? And yet that's got the potential. You need some system, some mechanism for organizing and prioritizing and keeping the relationship on an even keel while you're going to have the trade issues. So again, I don't mean to be overly negative. I keep coming back here regularly. I'm an optimist. I believe that there's a lot our two countries can do together. But I'm concerned because I would, as encouraged as I am by what I see at the top, I just think we need some kind of, we need more momentum around things that we're working on together, particularly in the economic area.
So Victor, I turn to you. By the way, Victor started his company here in Guangzhou, right?
My grandfather did.
Your grandfather.
1906.
Your
It's
company
111 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not that old.
I know. I didn't mean to say that. Your company was started here, and you can't believe how much this city has changed.
Oh, absolutely.
And how you were saying how beautiful it is. And
no, absolutely.
Gardens. And,
for 1,000 years, I think Guangzhou has been the trade gateway to China.
Yeah.
And I think it's really reestablishing itself in this role in the digital age.
That's great. And I want to drill down on that in just a minute. But let's follow up on what Hank said. You are not just a businessman, you're a thought leader. And you really have done some extraordinary thinking on what's going on in the global economy. So when we look at the rise of populism, the rise of nationalism, what's going on between U.S.-China relations, where are things and where should they be going, in terms of U.S.-China relations especially?
Well, I think Hank has it absolutely right. I think what we are doing now is we're in a world that is rather complex. It is not a zero-sum game. That's the thing that we really want to emphasize. It is a complex non-zero-sum game, which means we have areas in which we compete and we have areas in which we cooperate. And I think we've got to get the balance right. And if you actually want to compete in every area, you're turning a non-zero-sum game into a zero-sum game, and that is not good for anybody in the world. So really, what I think we need to do more is to encourage perhaps more contact at the business-to-business level and track 2 level, not just depend on G2G. And I think where we can do is create a lot more human contact, person-to-person contact, business-to-business contact, that would actually cement this idea that we can actually do things together that will be of mutual benefit. There will be areas that we will compete. Let's be realistic.
So Franz, you run a Dutch company you've really pivoted that company to move into a more innovative future with medical devices and healthcare technology, and you're betting big on China, right?
Well, you could say for sure we are a global company because only 1% of my revenue is in my home country.
Oh,
the rest is all
that's
global.
Incredible.
But
really cool.
so we are large in the United States, we are large in China. We call China our second home. In fact, we have been in this country for over 100 years and onshore since 32 years. And we call it second home because we want to ingrain in everybody's mind that we need to be local. We need to be locally relevant. We do R&D here, manufacturing, sales, service, the whole shebang. The Filippo brand, Philips in Chinese, Filippo, is very well known. And if you're relevant, you keep on having demand. Now, how do you stay relevant? That's the big question here. Companies die. The average tenure of a S&P company is now down to 18 years, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So companies need to reinvent it themselves. So have we done that. So several years ago, we made pivot where we said we will exit segments that are commoditizing. We are an innovation company. We need to focus on the unmet needs. What are the world's unmet needs? Climate, energy, health. Okay, health. So we said we take health because we have a good establishment in that, and we're going to build on it. In fact, we're going to double down on it. So we sold our lighting division, which was, our birthright, right? We sold out our television and we put everything on health, where we started to double up on health informatics, big data, artificial intelligence. We started to connect the dots between doctors and consumers in a new way, because what healthcare needs is actually to drive better output within the same amount of money. There's not more money for healthcare. We need to drive better outcomes for people and higher productivity. And technology will play a huge role in that. And so it's a very fulfilling mission to do that, and it has made us relevant, and that's why we grow.
So let me ask this question of all of you, but starting with you, Franz. Where is China on that road? George Yip wrote the book, From Imitator to Innovator. As a source of innovation, where do you see China right now?
Well, we were just talking about maybe a three-phase model where first China was the location for cheap manufacturing, right? And then it became also a consumption place, the growing middle class, fantastic domestic market. And I was here not so long ago with my management team, and we said, China is now moving in the phase of innovation. The next wave of innovation may well come from here. No longer do you do technology transfers from the West to China. It could be the reverse. So we are going to double up on our R&D commitment to China, because I believe there is great talent here, but also the will and the creativity, especially in the digital domain, to maybe go faster than Europe or the United States.
Hank, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I very much agree with it. And there are areas where China is leading right now. When you're looking at electric vehicles, or you're looking at moving toward a cashless society. And there are other areas where they're still behind, but they're definitely catching up, and that raises, and so I think that's very good for China. It's very good for the world, but I think also, as China becomes more of a developer of intellectual property, rather than just being an assimilator, I think you're going to see a greater emphasis on intellectual property protection. And I think that's going to be important. But I also think as China is making progress here, there's going to be more resistance, and rightfully so, from some of this, indigenous innovation. And the idea that foreign companies are forced to transfer technology. So again, I see it as a positive and real progress for China and for the world. But there continue to be some issues.
But I also see opportunities. I mean, back to what Victor said about businesses collaborating. We live in an era where innovation goes very fast, and you better collaborate, right? So open innovation, while protecting each other's intellectual property, is a good way. So what we have done is we have used our IntelliSpace kind of artificial intelligence diagnostics platform, have opened it up with APIs, and we invite local companies to build apps on top of it. And so now it becomes an ecosystem where we need each other, right? Which is kind of nice. And I think that's a way forward to tap into the capacity of a market without necessarily fighting each other.
And Victor, and you talk about the Greater Bay Area.
Well, I'd like to make 2 points. I totally agree with what Franz and Hank was saying. I think, first of all, we need to focus on the Chinese consumer. I think the Chinese consumer is actually fast becoming the most discriminating consumer in the world. It's absolutely technology enabled. The average Chinese is spending 4 or 5 hours, on the phone and on the web every day. It is actually a very well-to-do market at a much younger age. We think that the sweet spot for spending is at least 10 years younger in China. And then finally, that means it's a very active customer. And finally, it's the outbound Chinese that are traveling. 110 million Chinese traveling abroad last year. It's forecast in the next 5 years to go to 200 million. And they get a lot of external exposure. So the net of all that is we're seeing a lot of new business models especially the technologically driven, the O2O, the omni-channel type models being developed in China.
And you're doing it.
Well, we're actually participating in it. But we think that, as Franz was saying, we need to actually look at what's happening in China for its application to other parts of the world. And that's very important. Now, the second point I'd like to just touch on very quickly is, I think the leadership has now embarked on another, really, after the 19th Congress, another view of China in the next stage of development, roughly from 2020 to 2050. The key at this stage in China's development is sustainable growth. China stood up in the era from 1949 to 1979, and then from 1980 to 2020, basically it grew very prosperous and large. Now I think it's in sustainable growth. In that respect, I think the key is the focus on innovation. The focus also then, of course, on health, the focus on sustainability, climate, etc. So in that respect, I think there's a lot of government encouragement of innovation. And I think that is going to be another factor that would actually come into this entire mix.
How will the Belt and Road Initiative shift the dynamics of globalization? I combine that with the fact, and this isn't exactly related, but the fact that Justin Trudeau was here and is clearly trying to bond with China, and the U.S. is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So it's more like the U.S. being left out of the action is what I'm getting at here.
So, to me, it's in many ways breathtaking. I was here for the for the event in early July. And, it's written into the Constitution, and I think it's become a symbol for China and globalization. And so when you look at it writ large, it's, roughly, 65 nations, 29% of global GDP, 60% of the population. So it is huge. And to get to your question, Nina, I think the key for this to be really, to be an open process is to be open to foreign competition. So you get buy-in from foreign companies, from suppliers. I think I want to get to what Victor said about sustainability, because I've been really, one of the most extraordinary changes I've seen is the focus on the environment in this country. And I would like to see the same focus on the environment as China builds infrastructure around the world and builds power plants and so on. So I think here there's an opportunity, and this is one thing that my institute is working on green financing principles. And so I'd like to see also a focus on financial sustainability, and that means that when you're building infrastructure in certain countries, you want to make sure you don't pile them too high with debt when you do that. So again, I think this can make a huge contribution, but there's going to be big focus on it. It is, as I said, the world is going to be watching what China does there, and I think it's obviously very welcome to the countries that are receiving it, and if done in the right way, it could be a boon for the whole world.
I'd love to get some questions from the audience, so raise your hand and we'll continue until you get a mic to you. Franz, what about the China and healthcare technology, and where is that going, not just inside China, but outside China?
Well, the China health technology industry is developing rapidly. Now, that's competition, but we all need to innovate, no problem. I would like to make a pivot to the China health strategy, which is basically their 2030 health strategy, where China has put a North Star there to say from curative sick care, we need to get to big health, right? Basically preventative care and so on, and avoid that people need to go to hospitals. And in order to get there, there's a strategy, which is again nice, because now you have a North Star and then you get a plan, right? And the plan involves creating huge data lakes around health. Now, just imagine what those data lakes can be used for. To optimize care, to get to best practice, but also to maybe develop pharmaceuticals. Because now you get insight on over 1 billion people and how their disease is evolving in relation to their DNA. And you can just see how the health strategy not only is going to be great for the people, but is also going to be foundational for a whole new wave of industrial innovation, for example, around pharma. Right, so I think we can expect the Chinese health tech and pharma industries to develop rapidly over the next years, which as Western companies we can then say, we are going to be local and therefore we are going to be part of it. But as, let's say, foreign nationals, I think other regions better, do something similar. Where's the North Star in Europe? Right? Or are we going to stay divided country by country?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think in the end you need to mobilize your talent and intellect in order to get ahead. And that is what China is doing very well.
Victor?
I'd like to just add to the Belt and Road, and I totally agree with what Hank has said. On the one level, it's a very, really important multilateral initiative. But I'd like to give a perspective from a business standpoint. What does it mean to the businessman? I think it's important for us to recognize that, yes, right now we're talking about connectivity and building infrastructure, and also the financing of infrastructure. I'd like to ask the question, okay, in 5 years, after the infrastructure is built, what's going to flow? The goods, the people, the information, the funds, etc. And what we really need to do is recognize how we can use the Belt and Road for the flow. And here, I'd just like to mention one thing. I think the world's consumption pattern is changing dramatically. It used to be, I'm going back to 1980, the whole world basically is focusing on the consumption in the OECD markets. 84% of global consumption was in OECD. So we as a world, sort of a global trader, we've sourced in the East and we sold in the West. Sourced in the East and sell in the West, and the containers will come back empty. But now I think that's very, very much changing. The middle class growing in the developing economies have shifted the balance of that consumption. And we're now finding new markets and new consumption in the developing economies. Right. And that's very important. But how do you access that? The fact of the matter is the Belt and Road connecting the 60-some countries is a platform that would access about 80%, in our view, of this new consumption.
That's interesting.
And so for the next 30 years, it's going to be crucial.
George needs a mic over here. And what's interesting about the Belt and Road Initiative, by the way, and the U.S. being left out theme that I'm hitting on here, is that most people in the U.S. have never heard of the Belt and Road, have no idea that this is going on. Nobody in the media talks about it. Nobody, politicians don't talk about it. No one knows what it is, which is pretty extraordinary. George.
George Gibb, co-author of China from Imitation to Innovation. Meneer van Houten, goedemiddag. What does Philips find to be the strengths and weaknesses of Chinese R&D staff?
Well, we're going from weakness to strength now, right? So, but let's say creativity used to be one of the challenges, but in the digital age, that's gone, right? And this is where China is leapfrogging, and actually we see on the digital side innovation that is stronger than in the Western world. More so than maybe on the traditional physical hardware side.
We have a question right here in front. Where are mics? Yes, thank you. And just identify yourself, thanks.
Christine Lam, I'm the sort of C group representative here in China. In listening to the panel and just generally other who have spoken today, I sort of read a much more, I would say, a constructive view of China amongst business people. Maybe it's because it's a bias sample. We're all here because we are positive about China. But versus maybe the government level read, it seems to be more suspicious at the government level. I wonder if the panel would agree with my observations, and if so, what would be your suggestions in terms of what we in the business community can do to help maybe bridge those gaps?
And I would add to Christine's point, the business people who are here, who are naturally have a relationship and an affinity for China. I'm not sure you'd find all that positive from a lot of Western businesses too, so if you could address that.
Yeah, so I will speak there because I'm a former businessman and I worked in government, and I believe and now I do not-for-profit things, but I work very closely with business. And I'm a big, big believer about economic linkages, business linkages. As you know, Jack Ma said this morning, when you have trade, you don't have war. So I'm all for that. But I would say many big multinational companies that are outside of China, doing business in China, are finding it more and more difficult to do business in China because the market's getting bigger, it's getting more attractive, and many of them are making good money in the market, but the market isn't open to many industries. So they're not able to come in. They have to work with a joint venture partner. They look at some of the way the anti-monopoly law works, or the way the new national security law work, or the way standards work, and it's not a level playing field. And so what you're starting to hear much more of, and you're hearing this in the U.S. and you're hearing it in Europe, the idea of reciprocity. In other words, I used to, when I was Treasury Secretary, I used to say to my Chinese counterparts, Wang Qisheng and Wu Yi, I would say to them, look, I believe in free trade. And I believe the U.S. benefits from exports to China and from imports. But there are many people, there are dislocations that come from trade, and many people in my country disagree. It'll be easier for me to keep our markets open for you if you continue to open your markets to us. And now, right now, we're hearing reciprocity, and I happen to believe if we don't see in some of the big, important industries where the U.S. is a leader, if we don't see those markets start to open up, you're then going to see big parts of the global economy closed off to China and the rest of the world. So I don't think that would be good. Now, there are positive signs. I was pleased to see the China's begin to open up the capital markets. Okay, that's a positive sign. But I said to myself, why 51%? Why not 100%? A U.S. financial institution can go, can just about anywhere else go and have 100%. And that would, and it's hard to run a joint venture. You know, it's hard enough to run an investment bank if you got 100% control. And so I would say, why wouldn't China want, if they want to have world-class capital markets, why wouldn't they want to have world-class investors and bankers and investment bankers here? Why do they have to still keep propping up the domestic industry? And so that's the other side. And you're getting it from someone who has been a big advocate of economic reform in China, and I see there's been a lot of progress. I would like to see it. And so I think the other thing that business looks at, and which would surprise me, you have outstanding companies in China, outstanding companies now. I think the private sector has done wonders, and that's the future of China. But you still have tens of thousands of inefficient state-owned enterprises piling up mounds of debt. Okay, and so when you prop up those companies, it slows everything down. So there are positive things, but I'm answering your question. And so your question is, why, can't multinational companies do more to convince their governments? I actually think multinational companies are complaining to their governments rather than being a source. They come here and they say good things, right? If I was running a multinational company, I wouldn't come up with any negatives when I was talking here. I would do that in private. So, and the thing I love about this country is you can be very, very candid in private, there's, and there's a lot of positive things. So anyway, that's the
so
answer to
I know
your question.
Victor wants to respond, but I have one quick question. What's your perspective on how open the Belt and Road Initiative is?
We have to wait and see, right? China says it's going to be open, but I think it's early days of that. And I look at it and say the world needs infrastructure, okay? The U.S. doesn't build infrastructure. The U.S. more or less doesn't fund infrastructure. And this could be a very good thing, but it will need to be open, and I think open to all sorts of foreign companies and suppliers. And again, I made the other points I made about environmental sustainability and financial stability. So I just think that this is going to get a lot of scrutiny, because you don't hear about it much right in the U.S. today, but it's huge. It's written into the Constitution. China is serious about it. So there's going to be a microscope on it. The world's going to look at it, and we will see. And I'm cautiously optimistic.
Victor, sorry.
My view, Nina, is the Belt and Road system will be totally open. China cannot do this on its own. In fact, I would look at just the other way around. This is really a beginnings of a new effort to create a new multilateral system for the world. And really it's the participation, it's a Chinese idea, yes, but there's no way, even with the amount of investments that the Chinese can make, to actually do it alone. The needs, as sort of pointed out by ADB and everybody else, is completely many times what China itself can afford. So it is a system that will actually be totally open. And I think, to answer the original question, I just want to add a very quick point. I think, in today's world, I think what we really need now is a rebuilding of the multilateral system. And again, having a rule-based system that will not deteriorate into a number of bilaterals. And then businessmen in their own respective countries complaining about unfair competition. What we really need is transparent, open system. And the question in my mind is, it is now about time for us to rebuild that multilateral system. But how? I think it needs leadership. It needs leadership from the US, from China, from Europe, and others. And I think this is the time to do it. And the Belt and Road perhaps is, in fact, that concrete experiment that would actually be the example on which the new multilateral system can be built.
Franz, what's your take on Hank's criticisms?
Well, I think there's still room for further leveling the playing field. It depends a little bit by industry segment. At the same time, sometimes companies also complain, but actually they're not competitive, right? So we need to sort through this issue, make sure that we are competitive and really try. And it is a complex market. You need to be local to be successful. You cannot just expect that you can sell something without making the effort. But I agree with Hank that there's also areas where, let's say, we can go further. Now, if I go to Beijing and we discuss it, then you always get the same commitment. We are WTO, we are heading there, and it is our belief, Chinese belief, in a global setup. So, and I think that's where we are heading.
So we've run out of time. I still want to have each one of you give a piece of advice to global leaders in today's world, whether it's investing in China or just navigating this new era. What's the one big piece of advice you would leave? Victor.
Well, I think in this era of innovation and dramatic change with digitalization and so on, I think nobody has the real answers. The only way to do is to really create a culture of rapid experimentation and really keep on testing new ideas, find the environments. You were talking about the Explorium, which we have, which is our lab to test retailing in Shanghai. And we just keep on testing new O2O omni-channel ideas in that particular lab, how to use technology, etc. I think that is the only way to move forward in today's world.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of change, but some things never change. And the key to success is hiring the very best people from around the globe, coming up with a culture for integrating them, getting them to work together, and being in an environment where they can be creative, where people can speak what's on their mind, and I still really, it really comes down also to integrity. Having an environment where people want to, not only obey the law and know they have to obey the law, but do the right things. And that tone is set at the top. But remember, there's certain things that you're never going to change. Those are your core values. Everything else you have to be prepared to change and need to change as the environment changes, and particularly when you're working in China, because the amazing thing about this place is I come regularly, and every time I come I learn something new, and there's dramatic change, and it's really exhilarating to be here. It makes it fun and interesting, but it's all about people and culture.
Excellent.
Very smart words. I agree with them. Let's just go do it.
So, speaking of which, thank you all for being here for this incredible day. This is our final session. However, the buses are downstairs ready to leave for dinner. They're going to take us to the Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall. Please remember to wear your credential so you can get in and out of the buses and the hall. Leave your headsets here. Thank you to our panel, and have a great dinner.
Ladies and gentlemen, please exit the ballroom and head straight to the gala dinner transportation at the front of the hotel. Thank you.
女士们、先生们，请您离开宴会